Yeah, we're all over it today. GBViews at gbnews.com. Get those emails coming in. Do you think it's time to sack the Governor of the Bank of England? But now it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 3:01. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England has increased the base rate by half a percentage point to 5%, the highest rate in 15 years, as it tries to tackle ongoing price rises. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, says inflation is still too high and must be dealt with. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government's resolve to bring inflation down is watertight. It's the 13th time in a row the bank has increased the interest rate. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the government has lost control of the economy.
Today's an incredibly worrying time for many families right across the country who are concerned about what happens when they come off fixed-term mortgage deals. Already people were facing mortgage payments of £3,000 on average more than the rates they were coming off of. This is going to heap even more pain on ordinary working families. It's why today Labour have set out a 5-point plan to help people with their mortgages.
Well, amid rising inflation, as we heard there from Rachel Reeves, Labour's called on banks to provide support to homeowners facing mortgage payment difficulties. The party claims their 5-point plan would allow borrowers to switch to interest-only payments or extend their mortgage terms. The government says lenders are already required to engage with struggling customers. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party's plan will provide the security the country needs.
We're going to take this on. It's at the heart of everything. And it shows our determination to fix the fundamentals that make British inflation stickier, global shocks more painful, weigh down on your profits and the living standards of our people. That's the partnership we offer, a new plan for a new settlement, for renewal, not decline, the future, not the past, the builders, not the blockers.
As the search enters its critical phase, 2 remotely operated vehicles are joining the search for the missing Titan submersible. The Victor 6000 has 2 mechanical arms, which can carry out extremely delicate manoeuvres, such as cutting or removing debris. A second powerful ROV, Juliet, is being flown in from Jersey. Both can reach the seabed and transmit images to the surface. The US Coast Guard says this remains an active search and rescue operation. 5 people are inside the missing submersible that lost contact on Sunday. Hamish Harding is one of them. His friend says he didn't think the vessel was safe.
I wasn't happy with some of the design, like the thrusters on the outside with the cables there. I thought that was a snagging hazard. But what really did it for me was they flatly refused to get any form of certification. And it seemed that they had no intention of getting any certification for going down to those depths once, let alone several times.
Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has ruled himself out of the race to become the next NATO chief. When asked about leading the alliance, he told The Economist he was withdrawing because of unresolved issues within the organisation. He also stated the US wants the current Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg to continue in the role. He's due to step down in September. The Ukrainian Intelligence and Security Service has received information that Russia's considering an attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine will share all available information with their global partners, warning radiation knows no national borders and its hits are only determined, he says, by the direction of the wind. A man who allegedly smuggled thousands of people from Africa into Italy has been arrested here in the UK. The 40-year-old Egyptian national was detained in London by National Crime Agency officers. He's now being questioned on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration. King Charles says the Windrush generation has made a significant difference to the UK, praising its legacy as profound and permanent. 75 years after the first crossing from the Caribbean, the King is among those at a service held at Windsor Castle, marking the anniversary. A £1 million fundraising effort's also underway to recover the anchor from the ship that made that crossing. HMT Empire Windrush sank off the coast of Algeria in 1954. And tech billionaire Elon Musk is picking a fight with Mark Zuckerberg. And guess what? The Meta boss is well up for it. Mr. Musk posted on Twitter that he was keen for a cage fight with Mr. Zuckerberg. The fellow tech billionaire then replied, posting a screenshot of the tweet on Instagram, of course, with the caption, "Send me location." While Twitter's CEO responded, "Vegas Octagon." That's a fight we're all looking forward to. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back over to Patrick.
Let's get stuck in straight away, shall we? It is time to sack the Governor of the Bank of England. Andrew Bailey is an ocean-going dud who has made millions of people's lives worse. He deserves to be metaphorically strung up, in my view. He is the plank of England. I would suggest that we should put him in the stocks and throw veg at him, but thanks to his running of the economy, nobody can afford even the slightly rotten stuff in the little reduced aisle. The main job of the Bank of England is to keep inflation below that 2% target. Well, that's gone catastrophically wrong, hasn't it? He didn't see it coming. He's been asleep at the wheel, and not for the first time. This numpty once faced allegations of actually falling asleep during a meeting between campaigners acting on behalf of the British Steel Pension Scheme and the Financial Conduct Authority, and of him failing to take swift action to protect those affected by what went on to become one of the UK's biggest pension mis-selling scandals. Again, millions of people suffered. There's a theme here, isn't there? Big, fat cat money man can't be bothered, so laid back he might as well be in a coma, not on top of his brief, doesn't do his job. Millions become poorer. This idiot can't even remember how much money he earns. It's somewhere in the region, by the way, of around £575,000 a year. When quizzed on his salary, he said he didn't carry that figure around in his head. No. He carries it around in flipping wheelbarrows, doesn't he? Britain deserves Bailey's salary back, if you ask me. Rinse him. Millions of ordinary people are going to have to sell their house. Well, so should he. He didn't see inflation coming. He's been appalling throughout the cost of living crisis. We're now lagging behind the world thanks to him. He even told people to not ask for a pay rise, reportedly. Reach into his bank account, make him feel the pain that everybody else is. And as for that twerp Hugh Pill, the Bank of England's chief economist, he's on almost 200k, reportedly. Apparently, he's well got a nice £1.5 million pad in London. He said that people need to accept being poorer. Well, look, if Bailey was a football manager, he'd have been sacked ages ago. If he was the family dog, he'd have been taken on one last trip to the vet. Annoyingly, the only way he can be sacked, apparently, is if Rishi Sunak does it himself. Well, Rishi, sack him. Get him gone. Sack the plank of England. Ditch the dud. Well, there we go. I just want to ask what you think about all of this as well. GBViews at GBnews.com. Get your views coming in thick and fast on this. When you see the economic numbers dropping today, what I need to know is whether or not you actually feel poorer, whether or not you blame anyone, who you think really is to blame. GBViews at GBnews.com. But I am joined now, live in the studio, by Dr. Roger Giwob, who is the former advisor of the Bank of England and the UK Treasury. Now, have I been too strong there?
No, I honestly don't think so. I mean, our 13th consecutive interest rate rise in a little over a year, taking us to 5%. People say, well, wait a minute, interest rates were 14, 15% in the 80s. Hey, calm down. Well, read the Leeds Building Society and the other reports that have come out and said that a 6.4% mortgage today is the equivalent of a 25.7% mortgage in 1980. Tell me about those good old days, hey? I mean, this is outrageous. And both Mr. Bailey and the old lady of Threadneedle Street, Patrick, they've both got form in this. Bailey has been criticized for losing people billions by acting too slowly when he was running the Financial Conduct Authority in the Woodford crisis, in the London and Capital crisis, where they say he should have acted quicker. And the Bank of England, believe it or not, as long ago as the 1840s, reacted too slowly, didn't foresee inflation, and then did what Bailey is doing now, piled on a slew of interest rate rises and wrecked the economy. So it's not the first time that it's happened. And the other thing is, This is cost push inflation. In other words, in Earth language, not consumer driven. We're trying to decide between heating and eating. Nobody's overspending like they are in the States, where inflation has been halved by rising interest rates. That doesn't work here. They all know this, but these guys, they're almost kind of Jobsworths. They're sitting around thinking if they don't take some action, they'll be criticized, so they might as well do this. And the government, Rishi and the others, he was just on, backing them up. I mean, it's insanity. We are going deeper and deeper into a dark pool of madness.
Yeah, and there's talk now of a conscious recession. Get this, right? You might as well learn this phrase very well, a conscious recession, which sounds like it takes the edge of it. Well, we're consciously in a recession now. We're doing this deliberately. But the very fact that we're having to have this conversation now, as millions of people, as you said, are choosing between heating and eating, millions of people are about to be absolutely clobbered with some kind of epic mortgage payment that they probably can't pay. They go to their local shops, they see what the price of food is in there. They've got security tags, for goodness sake, on milk cartons and cheese and butter. And then you look at this guy and you just think, have you actually done your job?
Well, I've been saying this for over a year, since the first rate rise. You do not raise interest rates in the face of non-consumer inflation. When people are spending too much, you raise interest rates. You don't crush them.
Yeah.
And this is just insane, but they won't listen. Now,
they won't listen. And what strikes me is a staggering lack of creativity. It's something I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. Philip Hammond, Spreadsheet Phil, he's crawled back out from under his rock, hasn't he? He was talking about, well, you know, one thing that we could do to solve the old mortgage crisis will be to increase immigration, for goodness sake. Is this all they've got?
Yeah, let's go into recession. Let's have an induced recession coma for Britain. Let's increase immigration. Let's do the opposite of all of Sunak's 5 points. I interviewed Nigel Farage the other day on the subject of why do we have such bad leadership. You can Google that and listen to his answers. Look, I know we don't have a lot of time. I just want to say there are some things that the government could do. And it's interesting that Labour's standing by saying nothing. Well, why should they? This is going to fall into their lap, isn't it? Here's what the government should do. I'm very sorry. I've got to look at my list.
Let's do this, because I want to know what you think. You clearly have your head screwed on. What should we do now?
There's a bunch of things that could be done in an afternoon, in a week, which, unlike monetary policy, in other words, in Earth talk, playing with interest rates up and down, takes 2 years to work through. These would work straight away, okay?
Go on.
I've got to look at my list. Number one, they need to put pressure on the Bank of England to not raise interest rates anymore, maybe even bring them down. Take your foot off our ruddy throat, for God's sake, okay? It needs to reduce VAT temporarily. It needs to reduce the huge government tax take of sometimes 50 to 80% on petrol and diesel temporarily. It needs to uncouple the price of electricity from the almost totally irrelevant, much more expensive price of gas. Our electricity is priced off of gas, which Putin manipulates, and we're paying far more. It's estimated by one think tank we have paid £7.2 billion in excess electricity charges in the last 24 months.
Shocking.
They need to uncouple us and charge what our electricity really is. If you don't believe me, folks, go to the national grid. They have a live, real-time online clock that shows you where our electricity is coming from, and you'll see some days 10% from gas, 20%, not 100%. Why are we paying all that money? They could do that in an afternoon. They need to defer Haughty Hunt's ridiculous. I mean, the picture of him smiling, announcing, wait a minute, isn't this the guy who said, I want to be prime minister and I promise you a corporation tax rate of 12.5%?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it became 25. And he said, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, guys. Announcing this corporation tax rate cut at a time like this, in the worst cost of living crisis we've ever experienced, for God's sake, defer it, man, until we're through this. Yes, corporations should pay, they should contribute, but it's just going to be passed on to us. I said on Nigel's show, these people are so stupid they can't see past their nose. Don't they know 3 weeks from now the tax increase will be added to our prices? So that's the last thing that they should do.
Look, you've
if they
hammered
did those in one afternoon, it would take billions off the cost of living
But
burden.
that would take action. That would take action. That would take people actually getting off their backsides and having a backbone and going and doing something. Because I'm sorry, but right now I'm looking around the country and I'm just thinking that people, crucially, and this is the big thing, you know, that old thing about, like, oh, well, maybe the young people can just have one less rooftop cocktail somewhere around Soho. Yeah, all right, that was true for a while. Oh, those people, maybe they should give up the fags and the booze. Yeah, all right, fine. But actually now, millions of people are doing nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong. And they are being badly run. We're going to have to leave it. We're going to have to leave it. I could talk to you all day, but what a way to start the show. Thank you very much. Dr. Roger Gilwell.
Thank you.
Former advisor to the Bank of England. I bet you wish he was there now, don't you? And, of course, former advisor to the UK Treasury. Look, you mentioned Nigel there. A little bit later on, we're going to be hearing from Nigel Farage. He has absolutely slated Andrew Bailey. In fact, I believe we might be able to hear him now, can we?
The economic incompetence by which this country is now being led beggars belief. Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, known as Andrew Out to Lunch Bailey, because he's never around when you need him, was, as head of the regulator, someone who put in place legislation that effectively damaged the pensions of every single one of you. Then Boris, for some crazy reason, gave him the top job at the Bank of England. He didn't see inflation coming. When it started, he said it was transitory. He didn't put rates up. And because of that, our inflation rate is now higher than that in Europe and in America. And now rates are going to soar, and anybody with borrowings is going to pay the price. This bloke is a total incompetent. We needed a Brexiteer as Governor of the Bank of England, someone believed in making us competitive. He is no good. It is time he was sacked. It is time, Rishi, to ditch the dud.
Well, get your views coming in. Ditch the dud, sack the Plank of England, GBViews at gbnews.com. But we are the People's Channel, so we want to hear how today's interest rate rise is affecting you. And maybe, just maybe, people like Andrew Bailey can really have a look at this. OK, let's cross now to our North West of England reporter, Sophie Repo, who's been doing stellar stuff for us in the wonderful city of Manchester. Sophie, thank you very much. Right, OK, I'm just going to throw it over to you, Sophie. What's happening where you are? Who have you got? How are they feeling?
Thank you very much, Patrick. We are back with our wonderful People's Panel here in Wythenshawe in Manchester. Like you say, let's dive straight into it. Hendrix, I would like to hear more about, you run a homelessness charity called Coffee for Craig. You obviously on a day-to-day basis will be working with and seeing people who are obviously facing this to the extreme. We've seen inflation's remaining the same. We've seen interest rates have now risen. What kind of impact is that going to have?
Our service is going to be overwhelmed. It's as simple as that. When people have got to make a choice between food and fuel, or paying rent, or staying in a job, you know, these are the kind of day-to-day decisions people are having to make now, and we should never be faced with making those sort of decisions. Everybody should be able to work for a living and live, and live to work, not work to live. And if people are, 2 or 3 jobs just to keep their head above water, unless something really drastic is done, services like ours are just going to become completely overwhelmed. And, I think the problem is we're finding with the rate of inflation going up and the cost of living going up constantly, the donations are not going up. But we're having to keep our staff employed, so therefore our cost of running and operating is going up. Our staff wages are trying desperately to keep up with the rate of inflation, but our donations are dropping because giving to charity is seen as a luxury, and a lot of people now, but ironically what you find is the people that are in poverty are the ones that give us the most, and that's the fact of it.
It's obviously a really difficult situation. Of course, one of the things that we've already talked about today is the cost of essentials, food, toilet paper, sanitary products. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think it's so difficult when you're faced with a choice of getting toilet paper, paying your gas bill or food. Do you know what I mean? Because everything is going up and it's not affordable. Even us as a charity, as Hendrix was saying, we have to sort of look at what we can actually buy to cook for our guests. So how it feels when you're in a household and you've got your kids on picking choices of food, all the cheap foods are the processed, bad for you foods, and veg, really good veg, really good food is just so high. You can't even choose to eat well for your family, let alone have food and fuel and electricity. Like we were talking, the luxuries of being able to ensure that your kids can go out and look after themselves and have a really good time just doing exercise. You know, it's having a massive detrimental effect on all of us, employers, employees, people who can't get a job. It's affecting all of us.
You mentioned luxuries there. John, I'll come to you. You run a business which it could be described as a luxury, people participating. Is that something you've noticed in terms of your business?
It's sort of gone a little bit quieter, obviously, since COVID, nearly put it out of business. I run a tour guiding business in Manchester, but I'm always on the streets of Manchester, and for many, many years, you see the homeless rise. You see more people at traffic lights, you see more people sleeping in doorways, and it's always, you think, how hard must your life be that you've got to go and do that? And like Hendrix and the lady says, it's so difficult, isn't it? You've got stark choices, haven't you? Food, fuel, and then it's ordinary people as well who've got jobs, who've got businesses that are actually becoming homeless as well. It's really difficult. That needs to be taken into control.
Absolutely, and of course we've just been hearing from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak earlier on this afternoon, who says that inflation is his key priority, but it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks and months if he will be able to reduce it to help these people, like we've just been talking about, to like you say, not just live for work but to live, I suppose. So a big thank you to my People's Panel for today. They've been absolutely phenomenal, so a big thank you to you guys as well.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, Sophie. Great stuff, and thank you, everyone, there from me as well. Just speaking to real people on the ground, the kind of people that I think Jeremy Hunt and Andrew Bailey could do a bit more to actually go out and talk to. They're probably scared of meeting them, let's be honest, probably scared of meeting them, because then they would be confronted by the consequences of their own decisions and inaction. As you can tell, I'm absolutely fizzing about this today, the economic Armageddon that is facing us, and the fact that I just really do feel there's an astonishing lack of creativity and a lack of bottle and backbone has led to this situation. And you see the likes of spreadsheet Philip Hammond crawling out from under his rock and saying that we need more immigration to solve the housing crisis. I mean, good grief, what planet is this guy on? But more on this huge story on our website, gbnews.com, the fastest growing national news site in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion and the latest breaking news. But in other news, the search for the 5 people trapped in the missing Titan submersible is getting more and more desperate now. But the rescue team isn't giving up hope, and there will be a press conference on this show for the latest updates. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Should smokers be able to pay, or be made to pay, for their own treatment? They are going to be given, apparently, access to free lung scanners. Is that the right thing to do, do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com. And I've got loads more as well on the Bank of England's bombshell decision to increase the interest rate to 5%. But now, to the latest on the search for the missing Titanic tourist submersible. And emergency oxygen levels on board the deep-sea vessel were expected to run out this lunchtime, sadly. Downing Street has confirmed a Royal Navy submariner is now helping the rescue, and specialist equipment is also on its way from the UK. Look, yesterday on this very show, I was talking about the fact that apparently this specialist equipment that supposedly anyway can reach those depths and actually potentially get to those people has been sitting on the tarmac on a runway in Jersey since Sunday. Well, why is it on the way now? Anyway, it's been confirmed that 19-year-old Solomon Dawood, one of the 5 people missing, is a student at Strathclyde University. I'm joined now by Simon Boxall, who is a senior lecturer in oceanography at Southampton University. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Has it been too little too late if we're just flying over equipment now? It just seems almost a bit pointless at this stage.
No, I mean, they already have a lot of kit out there. I mean, they've got 2 deep-sea ROVs that are capable of going down to these depths on site already. Another one won't harm, but these things take a while to get over there. It's not just a question of, putting them in the back of a lorry and then getting them to arrive. It's not just about the ROV itself. It's about the system that goes with it, the people go with it. It's not a simple task. And they have got a very good French system that arrived a while ago. They've got an American system. They've got the necessary bits they need to bring Titan, the submersible, to the surface if they find it. The problem is they haven't found it, and it's a huge task. They're looking for a needle in a field of haystacks.
Look, Simon, if you're being honest about this, do you think this is now going to be a recovery mission, not a rescue mission?
To be fair, the Coast Guard are still saying they are treating this as a search and rescue. We know that officially the oxygen ran out a short while ago. Having said that, it's not an exact science. They don't know exactly how much oxygen was on board. It depends on how pressurized the cylinders were. But also, it depends on how the people on board the sub were actually using oxygen. If they were conserving it, there's a sort of a 10-15% error margin there, which means they could well have already died, or they could still be alive and have another few hours of oxygen. So it's worth keeping this search and rescue mission going. But as was mentioned earlier, we're talking once they find it, if they find it, it's still going to take, I think, about 6 hours if everything goes to plan and there are no snags to get it from the seabed back to the surface. It's not a trivial task. And that's assuming it goes well. It could take days if it's not, if it's snared or there's a problem with it. Once they find it, if they find it, it could take days.
There's a bit of a debate, to say the least, raging online, whether or not the people who run these kind of companies, and dare I say it, maybe go on these kind of adventures, are a bit daft, or whether or not they are heroes for trying to be outliers in their fields who make discoveries. I mean, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of parts of the oceans, for example. I mean, where are you on that?
I'm afraid I'm in the former. They're not doing research. They're not discovering things down there. There's nothing new to discover down there. And there's nothing we can't do better with ROVs, remotely operated vehicles. They are cheaper, they're safer. We can leave them down there for days at a time. And the operators, the scientists, the true researchers are sitting in a ship, on a ship, controlling everything from the ship. You can't do anything different in a manned submersible. In fact, you can do a lot less. And you've got this additional thing that it's dangerous. It's a bit like, you know, people, it's a adrenaline kick. People are going up into space, they're going down in these things. It is tourism.
And there were reports yesterday of banging sounds being detected supposedly in an SOS fashion. We don't know whether or not those have stopped now. We also don't know necessarily whether or not that's exactly what they were. There was a well-placed source who was suggesting to us here at GB News that there was quite distinctive SOS sounds being detected. What do you make of that? We haven't heard that there's been any more today, which is potentially quite ominous. What else could it have been?
There are many things it could have been. And I think, to be honest with you, had it been a clear sort of Morse code SOS, I think the Coast Guard agency would have been far more straightforward about that. But the fact that they couldn't distinguish what these noises were, at no stage have they said it's an SOS signal. There's no reason to say it isn't if it is. So, you know, I think there's a lot of Chinese whispers going around in terms of what was actually heard. It is possible it could have been a distress call from the submarine, but the ocean is a noisy place. Sound travels hundreds of miles in the ocean. It's an amazing thing. That's why we use sound to probe the ocean. And so that sound could have come from a marine life, although it's unlikely. They can usually dismiss that fairly quickly. But bearing in mind, we've got this huge flotilla of rescue ships, of aircraft and things. These are all adding to the sound. And it's a bit like trying to find survivors in an earthquake rubble. What you want is complete silence, and you can't achieve that with so many ships around. So, you know, I think they generally thought it's worth investigating. I get the impression that they've refocused the effort closer to the ship, and that tells me that they felt that probably the sound wasn't someone sending an SOS.
OK, look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you and your wisdom on the show. I'm sure we'll be chatting again soon. Dr Simon Boxall there is a senior lecturer in oceanography at Southampton University. I believe we have some live shots now of Newfoundland in Canada, which is where a lot of these search and rescue operations have been launched from, which is where, of course, that submersible kind of came out of that harbour there at St John's Harbour in Newfoundland. And that is going to be the epicentre of a lot of the bases where this search and rescue operation, hopefully rescue operation anyway, is taking place from. So look, more on this as we get it. Again, just want to emphasise that the oxygen supposedly on that vessel ran out at around midday. As you just heard from the expert there, though, it is not an exact science. And what he said is it's not time to give up hope just yet. So let's cling on to that, shall we? But there's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. Now, it's reported that everyone who's ever smoked will be offered a free lung check for lung cancer. But I will ask whether or not smokers should pay for their own NHS treatment. And to say that that has kicked off in the inbox is an understatement, so I'll go to some of those emails. Really interesting stuff in there. And with interest rates still on the rise, the cost of living crisis showing no signs of going away, I will ask just how much money have we wasted on things like net zero and HS2? But first, it's time for your headlines with the wonderful Polly.
The top stories this hour: the Bank of England has increased the base rate of interest by 0.5 percentage point to 5%. That's the highest rate in 15 years as it tries to tackle the ongoing price rises. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, says inflation is still too high and must also be dealt with. The Prime Minister says he's on it and it's going to be OK. This is the 13th time in a row the bank has increased the interest rate. As you've been hearing, 2 remotely operated vehicles are now joining the search for the missing Titan submersible in the North Atlantic. The Victor 6000 has 2 mechanical arms which can carry out extremely delicate manoeuvres such as cutting or removing debris. A second powerful machine, Juliet, is being flown in from Jersey. Both can reach the seabed and transmit images to the surface. 5 people are still inside the missing submersible that lost contact on Sunday. The US Coast Guard remains with the view that this is an active search and rescue operation. A man who allegedly smuggled thousands of people from Africa into Italy has been arrested in the UK. The 40-year-old Egyptian was detained in London by the National Crime Agency, and if you're watching on television, you can see our pictures being supplied from them. Well, he's now being questioned on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration. And King Charles has said the Windrush generation has made a significant difference to the UK, praising its legacy as profound and permanent. 75 years after the first crossing from the Caribbean, the King will be among those at a service to be held at Windsor Castle later, marking the anniversary. A £1 million fundraising effort is also underway to recover the anchor from the ship and put it on display. HMT Empire Windrush sank off the coast of Algeria in 1954. Those are your headlines. More detail available. Head to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And looking at the markets for you, £1 will buy you $1.2762 and €1.1619. The price of gold is £1,505.30 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,490 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's an issue that divides people. Should smokers get free treatment for lung cancer? And I'm just going to branch it out as well, other self-inflicted illnesses. The government is going to offer checks to anyone who has ever smoked in an attempt to improve survival rates. Well, this got me thinking. Let's have a chat about it. I'm joined now by Hazel Cheeseman, who's the Deputy Chief Executive of Action on Smoking and Health. There we go. Thank you very much for joining me. It's great to have you on the show. Should smokers be made to pay for their own care?
Absolutely not. Smokers have an addiction. Most of them acquired that addiction as children, and most of them have tried many times throughout their lives to stop smoking before they get their illness that requires the NHS to step in and provide treatment. So in that context, it just seems completely unreasonable to suggest that smokers should pay for their care.
There is also the argument, as someone in our inbox called Jim has made, which is that potentially smokers are already paying for their own care in tax, actually. He says, I watch you every day whilst smoking. So Jim is an avid smoker, clearly. He says, I pay £8 in tax on my fags every single day. The country can't afford people to not smoke. I pay £3,500 in tax, more than a non-smoker every single year. Now, clearly that's not an advert for smoking, but there is an argument that smokers do already pay enough in tax, isn't there?
Well, certainly the price of cigarettes reflects the harm that they cause to people and to society as a whole. And I'm sure that it feels really expensive to Jim, and that's the point of those high taxes, is to encourage people to not smoke. But those taxes don't cover the cost of smoking to public finances, because there's very many costs to public finances from smoking. So the healthcare costs are one of them, but we've got social care costs. And of course, people get sick much younger when they smoke, so they're not able to have a full working life out of the workforce much sooner. So we don't have them paying taxes, but we also need to provide benefit payments to support people that aren't able to work. So the cumulative impact of all of those costs is much greater than the tax take.
OK, all right. And I suppose as well you could argue that I know some employers get very annoyed at their employees who smoke because they seem to take longer in breaks, don't they, than other people. But the argument would be, I'm certainly not saying I agree with this, but an argument would be that with all of the relentless anti-smoking information that there is out there at the moment, and unbranded cigarette packets and horrible pictures on the front of it, anyone who starts smoking now must know that they are in a roundabout way, killing themselves, and therefore, is that not a choice they've made?
But it's a choice that people are making, under the age of 18 by and large. Most people have their first cigarette as teenagers, and you're invincible when you're a teenager. So the idea that smoking is harmful just kind of doesn't really resonate for teens, and we've seen that over time. Education campaigns only go so far. But also, I would question how much people really understand the true health harms from smoking. I was looking at our survey data. We survey people each year, 12,000 adults across Great Britain. And if you look at the 18 to 24-year-olds that smoke, they are much less aware of the conditions that smoking causes than smokers over the age of 25. And this may in part be because we haven't been on TV with these big, hard-hitting mass media campaigns in the last, really since 2010. And so I think that the understanding among young people about just how harmful smoking is actually not as strong as it used to be. And really that's something that the government should do something about, because it would be very cost effective to put those adverts back on TV and back on the internet and all those other places where we can communicate to smokers.
What about banning smoking? I am, as a rule, against banning everything, I must say, but in New Zealand, they've got this bizarre situation, last time I checked, where I think they're banning anyone from a certain age. So you could be confronted in a few years' time by a 45-year-old man or woman in a car park outside an off-licence asking a 46-year-old man or woman to go and buy them some fags, I think, which does seem a little bit like back to the school days, right? But is there an argument to say, well, if we are going to have to dish out free lung scans to everyone who's ever smoked, and then, of course, the costs that you've rightly identified there of not just hospital care, but other things to the economy that smoking can do. I mean, is there a case for banning it?
Well, there's a case for doing everything we can to reduce smoking, and I think an outright ban is very unlikely to achieve the goal of having fewer people smoking. So if our goal is to have fewer people smoking, let's do the things that we know will work. So one of the things that we've been calling for, and there's evidence from the US and from other places, is not necessarily the New Zealand style, but to raise the age of sale from 18 to 21, because most people have had their first cigarette before the age of 21. Moving in that direction, and other measures like licensing tobacco retailers, doing more around communicating to smokers through pack inserts and information on individual cigarettes. There's lots more that we could do. If we put all of those things in place, then we can achieve a country where nobody smokes without having to go and say, oh, we're banning this.
All right, look, thank you very, very much for your time. It's been great to have you on the show and have that chat. Hazel Cheeseman there, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of Action on Smoking and Health. The emails have been flooding in on this. gbviews@gbnews.com. I've just got time for one or two. Patrick, I'm an ex-smoker, and it was my choice to buy and smoke cigarettes. It took me 7 attempts, patches, gum, but I finally did stop. Well done, Karen. Yes, good stuff. We need to stop giving handouts for those. It's their choice to do it. So I think, Karen, you might be for smokers paying for their own care there. Should smokers be made to pay for their own care? No. Should fatties be made to pay for their diabetes care? Where does it end? There's no name on that one, and I can understand why. But it is a similar-ish conversation that we do occasionally have on this show, actually, about people who have self-inflicted eating issues, whether or not they should be paying for their own treatment as well. It certainly got you going. gbviews@gbnews.com. But Britain is facing financial meltdown. But it didn't need to be this way. Just how much money have we wasted on net zero, asylum seekers and vanity projects like HS2? I will tell you in a second. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, very shortly, I will be talking about the former Chancellor who claims that the solution to this financial crisis is, you ready? Increase immigration. OK. Let's get more, though, on the Bank of England's bombshell decision to increase the interest rate to 5%. It's a move that will hit millions of people across the UK. I opened up this show by openly calling for Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, I'm now calling him the Plank of England, to be sacked. Let's speak to our reporter, Will Hollis. Now, Will's at a mortgage broker's in Hull, OK? So this is right at the coalface of, at least talking to people anyway, about the dire straits that they are now in. Will, what's going on where you are?
Yeah, good afternoon, Patrick. Well, just to give you an idea, when it was 12 o'clock a couple of hours ago, when that information came in that it was going to be 0.5 percentage point, everybody stopped talking and they suddenly started working in a way that I hadn't seen them for the rest of the day. We've been here since the morning and we've been talking particularly about how mortgage rates are going to be really affected by that 0.5% and what it's going to mean when it's up to 5%. We've been talking particularly about fixed term contracts and when those contracts end, what might happen next. But it's not just about people that are getting on their mortgages, first-time buyers or people that are coming to the end of their contracts. A lot of people that might want a mortgage might be a little bit older and they might need later life advice, which is what Dan does. Dan, just describe for me, what's these high interest rates? What are they going to mean for particularly older people that are maybe in the 55 plus bracket?
I think you've really got two main thrusts for clients who are over 55. One is that there are a lot of people who are still stuck with an interest-only mortgage that they maybe took out 20 years ago, and that endowments have failed and they haven't been able to repay. A lot of these people are stuck on variable rates, which of course are increasing each time the Bank of England base rate goes up. A lot of people are on fixed incomes and they're finding it really, really hard to cope with the higher mortgage payments. So we're looking at solutions for those people to take on mortgages into retirement, or maybe even looking at equity release as a way to pay off those mortgages.
This has been in the news all week, but today, what kind of calls are you getting at UK Money Man from people where they're a little bit concerned about their interest-only mortgages?
There's an awful lot of people who are concerned about what the impact of this is going to be on the mortgage that they've got already, and they're also wanting to know what the solutions are to move forward from that.
And what kind of things are you hearing, and what kind of advice are you giving them?
Well, in a lot of cases, there's a solution where we can transfer them onto a retirement interest-only mortgage, or we can look at an equity release mortgage as well, which is has a fixed interest rate for life, which means that people have, don't have this concern in the future.
It's clearly a busy day, even if it's a little bit quieter down here in this part of the office. There's a full office upstairs, isn't there, Dan, where lots of people have been taking phone calls and checking all the different mortgages, because I think the real worry is that the banks are going to start withdrawing mortgages, and so people are trying to fix those rates in while they can, Patrick.
Yeah, Will, thank you, and thank you for everybody there as well. And I think that's a fascinating angle on this, because all too often it's, and I can understand why, it's young people who can't get on the property ladder. Yeah, but what about all of those people who, many people go, oh, you had it so good for years. Well, all right, maybe people did have it quite good for years, but they certainly haven't now. When you are a bit later in life as well, with absolute respect, there might be a bit less you can do about it. Someone my age, fingers crossed, have got years to mitigate any kind of economic disaster that I've got now. Less so if you're in your 60s. Will, thank you very much. Will Hollis there. Now, in light of this financial mess that we're in at the moment, OK, I thought, well, I'll have a little look about some of the epic, catastrophic wastes that we've seen. It's not just interest rates and high inflation. Yesterday, it's emerged that the UK's debt is greater than our GDP for the first time in 62 years. Remember that one of Rishi Sunak's 5 priorities is to reduce debt? Well, that's going well, isn't it? Anyway, it got me wondering, where has all the money gone? I'm having a look at what a waste of flipping money. Let's start with COVID fraud. The government lost £3.4 billion to that, as well as mistakes across COVID employment schemes. Bingo. And that's small change compared to the old PPE scandal. The government wasted almost £15 billion on unused PPE and other expenditure. It isn't just me kicking the government, by the way. Every other party wanted them to ramp up the spending on this as well, so it's a leadership thing. The government's bill for housing and supporting asylum seekers for just 12 months was £3.6 billion, 7 million quid a day, and guess what, as well, under every other party, the situation will probably get much worse. So again, a leadership thing. The most recent estimate for the cost of HS2 is £98 billion. £98 billion. For a slightly quicker train to Birmingham. But let's be honest, though, that figure's going to keep on climbing over the next few years, isn't it? And then there's our old favourite, net zero. Would you believe the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility says that's going to cost us a cool £350 billion over 30 years? What a waste of money. All of this stuff, and we're continuing to waste it. Meanwhile, the little guy gets poorer, the little guy gets clobbered. It is absolutely astonishing. And after the 4 o'clock hour, I am going to be getting stuck right into, I think we're being run by idiots. Just right across the board, wherever you look, whether it's education, whether it's transport, whether it's in government, whether it's in opposition, whether it's in what's going on in the Channel, whether it's in a variety of different sectors. When you look around at the moment, anywhere in the country, I just can't help but feel like we're being run by idiots. But on that tone, it's time now for Patrick's Pick of the Day. So this hour, I'm going to be focusing on our old friends Just Stop Oil. And the good news is that some of these Christys have finally had a shower. I think we've got a bit of a clip of you now. Now, this is a nice little montage of disaster for Just Stop Oil. So this clip just dropped this morning. I believe we can play it. So, look at this. The water comes off the balcony, all right? There we go. And that water's falling to the floor. Wallop! There we go. Wallop. Have that. You know, they're slow walking through the street and the water comes down. There's a van man behind them and they are not particularly happy with Just Stop Oil. In fact, he's so not happy, he's skirting around them. Look at this. He's decided to just mount the pavement and he's sped away for about 2 yards because there's a red light and a Tesco's trolley there. But there we go. It's actually now, there's all this kind of low-speed pursuit, isn't there? Are this lot going to catch him or not? We don't know. Oh, no, he's away, he's made it. Oh, they're back in the road again. He goes, for my family. Even pedestrians are getting annoyed with them now. I mean, people who are actually just walking are angry with them. They have alienated everyone. Oh, good grief, that poor bloke in his van's behind them. Oh, the police are here. Good. This will solve the problem quickly, won't it? Fantastic. Good stuff. If in doubt, call the coppers. There we go. What are they going to do? Arrest the guy in the van for tooting his horn, do we think? Or what do we reckon we're going to do? No. Are they still there? They're probably still there, aren't they? Well, there we go. That's Just Stop Oil. Right, now, it is less than a week to go until my date with Destiny. Regular viewers and listeners of this show will know exactly what I mean. I am going to be dancing on stage with the Dream Boys, who are, of course, the UK's most famous group of male strippers. I'm going to be doing 3 routines on the night. One of them will be a solo. And I met the lads a few weeks ago to learn the moves. Yes, there we go. And I will be strutting my stuff in Bromley in Kent next Wednesday. And viewers on GB News can now see some of the men who will be performing with me on the big night. Look at those fine figures of men, people who've spent their entire lives looking after each other and sculpting their bodies. And then me. So it's not going to be great. In fact, it's going to be utterly humiliating, and I will never live this down. It's no exaggeration to say I'm absolutely terrified of doing this. It is going to be awful. But I'm doing it for a good cause. I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And I'm delighted to say that you wonderful people have donated more than £66,000. Thank you to everyone who has given money so far. We can make a difference to the mental health crisis. And it's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Let's see if we can get to 70k. That would be wonderful and would save lives. But there we go. Look, here's what I've got coming up very shortly. There's even more pain now on the way for millions of homeowners. That interest rate was increased to 5%. The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey has a new name today. He's the Plank of England, and I think he should quit. But get a load of this. Is immigration, more immigration, really our only way out of this crisis? I say no. Find out why shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant Green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and in light of the economic mayhem that is being rained down by us by the incompetent Chief of the Bank of England, I'm just asking pretty straightforwardly, are we being run by idiots? I certainly think we are. Nothing seems to be going right wherever you look, right across the board, on both sides of the House of Commons. Are we being run by absolute idiots? I'm also going to be talking, of course, a lot about this. Is immigration really, more mass immigration, really the only way that we can cure the economy and, get this, solve the housing crisis? Spreadsheet Philip Hammond's crawled out from back under his rock and piped up, saying that maybe more mass immigration is the answer. Doesn't it defeat the idea that the Conservatives ever wanted to reduce it? But I'm also going to be talking about the Titan. Has time sadly run out? We were hearing that there were oxygen supplies on that craft, that somewhere, we think, near the wreck of the Titanic, supposedly that oxygen ran out about midday. But there is still hope. There is, hopefully, anyway, still a chance of rescue. We'll be talking about all of that and more trans madness. Yes, I am going to be talking to the lad. He's Scottish. A lot of people will have seen this video, who absolutely copped it and ended up being expelled from a school in Scotland for saying that there were only two genders. I will have him on the show thanks to you wonderful people who managed to help me track him down online. Patrick Christys on GB News. GBviews at gbnews.com. I'll keep it simple. Do you think we are being run by idiots when it comes to HS2, when it comes to the net zero agenda, when it comes to the Bank of England, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to, frankly, anything? You look around the House of Commons, you look around big industry. Are we being run by numpties? GBviews at gbnews.com. Polly now with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Well, we start with some breaking news coming to us in the last few moments. 20,000 railway workers going on strike for 3 days in July. The RMT union announcing industrial action on the 20th, the 22nd and the 29th of July. That is part of an ongoing national rail dispute. More on that story as we get it. But confirmation there will be picket lines this July during the holiday season on Britain's railways. More later. Well, the other big news today, the Bank of England raising the interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to 5% now. That's the highest rate in 15 years. The bank trying to tackle ongoing inflation. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, says inflation is still too high and must be dealt with. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says the government's resolve to bring inflation down is watertight. But this is the 13th time in a row the bank has increased the interest rate. Speaking to warehouse workers in Kent today, the Prime Minister said that halving inflation is still his top priority, but there was no easy fix.
I know how important this is. That's why I said it as my top priority. And look, it's not easy, right? Rooting out inflation is not easy. It requires difficult decisions, doesn't happen overnight. But if we don't get on top of it, it would just get worse and it would last longer. And that's not going to do anyone any favours. It's not going to be good for you and your families in the long run. And even though it means I have to make some difficult decisions, that's the type of Prime Minister I am, because I want to do the right thing for you and your families in the long term.
Well, amid rising interest rates, Labour has called on the banks to provide support to homeowners facing mortgage payment difficulties. The party claiming their 5-point plan would allow borrowers to switch to interest-only payments or extend their mortgage terms. The government says lenders are already required to engage with struggling customers. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says his party's plan will provide the security the country needs.
We're going to take this on. It's at the heart of everything. And it shows our determination to fix the fundamentals, but make British inflation stickier, global shocks more painful, weigh down on your profits and the living standards of our people. That's the partnership we offer, a new plan for a new settlement, for renewal, not decline, the future, not the past, the builders, not the blockers.
Well, let's turn our attentions to the North Atlantic now as the search enters its critical phase for the submersible that got lost on Sunday morning. 2 remotely operated vehicles are joining the search now for the missing Titan submersible. The Victor 6000 has 2 mechanical arms which can carry out manoeuvres like cutting or removing debris, and a second powerful underwater rescue vessel is also being flown in from Jersey. Both can reach the seabed and transmit images back to the surface. The US Coast Guard is sticking to its line. This remains an active search and rescue operation, and we know that 5 people are still inside the missing submersible that lost contact on Sunday. Hamish Harding is one of them. His friend says he didn't think the vessel was safe.
I wasn't happy with some of the design, like the thrusters on the outside with the cables there. I thought that was a snagging hazard. But what really did it for me was they flatly refused to get any form of certification. And it seemed that they had no intention of getting any certification for going down to those depths once, let alone several times.
The Ukrainian Intelligence and Security Service has received information that Russia is considering an attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country will share all available information with global partners, warning radiation knows no national borders and its hits are only determined by the direction of the wind. Here, a man who allegedly smuggled thousands of people from Africa into Italy has been arrested in the UK. The 40-year-old Egyptian was detained in London by the National Crime Agency. He's now being questioned on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration. King Charles says the Windrush generation has made a significant difference to the people of the UK, praising its legacy as profound and permanent. 75 years after the first crossing from the Caribbean, the King is among those at a service held at Windsor Castle later, marking the anniversary. And a £1 million fundraising effort also underway to recover the anchor from the ship and put it on display. HMT Empire Windrush sank off the coast of Algeria in 1954. Now, here's a strange one. The tech billionaire Elon Musk is picking a fight with Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, and guess what? The Meta boss is up for it. Mr. Musk posted on Twitter that he was keen for a cage fight with Mr. Zuckerberg. The fellow tech billionaire then replied, posting a screenshot of the tweet on Instagram with the caption, "Send me location." Twitter's CEO responded, "Vegas Octagon." We'll keep you posted on that. Back to Patrick.
In light of all the economic and political news that there is out there today, I just thought I'd start with this. We are being run by idiots. Everywhere you look, there appears to be some kind of disaster, and it's not a shock when you see who's running the show. We're now talking about going into a deliberate recession thanks to the fundamental failures by the fat cat governor of the Bank of England, more like the plank of England. Stevie Wonder could have seen this crisis coming, and he just sat on his hands, and now millions of people are going broke because he was reportedly asleep at the wheel. Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty, who looks like someone's rolled a boiled egg in cat hair, is back in front of the COVID inquiry today. He served up prediction after prediction after prediction that was wrong, wrong, wrong. He wasn't helped, of course, by the leader of the World Health Organization, this random Ethiopian chap, who initially saying that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission of COVID. Rishi Sunak's plans to cut the asylum seeker backlog have reportedly made things worse. The leader of the opposition takes the knee. The leader of the Lib Dems goes missing more than the hide-and-seek world champion. One of their councillors tweeted a picture of some bacon when saying that he was breaking his Ramadan fast. The former leader of the SNP is embroiled in a scandal, which she denies, relating to some money in a camper van. The current SNP leader can't ride a scooter without falling off it. The Mayor of London thinks anybody who doesn't want to pay more for the ULEZ charge is far right. The leaders of local councils like Woking, Slough and Croydon have racked up enough debt to cover the annual GDP of a medium-sized African nation. People with bright orange vests gluing themselves to roads are allowed to dictate our environmental policy. The RAF hasn't recruited some pilots essentially because they weren't diverse enough. The people we've put in charge of building a slightly faster train from Birmingham to London are expected to rack up a bill of around £100 billion. Our kids are being taught by people who think there are 100 genders and they can behave like farmyard animals. In some areas, it appears police forces have more chance of attending a pride event than they do of going to the scene of a burglary. Right across the board, we are being run by idiots. In case case you couldn't tell, I've had enough. GBviews at gbnews.com. More on that a little later on in the show. But now to our top story. And the worst fears of millions of homeowners came true today when the Bank of England increased the base rate to 5%. It's the 13th consecutive rate rise, and there are fears they could hit 6% by the end of the year. The man who was supposed to stop inflation going so high, the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, says they had no option, but to raise the base rate by 0.5%.
Today, we've raised interest rates to 5%. We've taken this decision because, unfortunately, inflation is still too high. The good news is our economy is doing better than we thought it might. Inflation has begun to fall and unemployment is very low. But recent data have shown us that further decisive action is needed in order to be sure we get inflation back down. And that's why we've acted today. We will continue to do whatever is necessary. I know this is hard. Many people with mortgages or loans will be rightly worried about what these changes mean for them. But if we don't raise rates now, high inflation could stay with us for longer. And inflation hits all of us, particularly those who can least afford it. Raising interest rates is the best way we have of getting inflation back down to the 2% target.
Bear in mind that he thought that inflation would be transitory, so he was wrong about that and then didn't act, and then also alluded to the fact that maybe people shouldn't ask for a pay rise, and that then one of his team said maybe people should accept being poorer. And then he couldn't remember how much money he earned a year, which is somewhere roughly in the region of around £575,000. But, you know, good stuff, Andrew. Cheers, mate. Yeah, great. The Prime Minister told an audience of IKEA workers at a factory in Kent that there was no alternative.
Inflation eats into the pounds in your pocket. It's as simple as that. Makes everybody poorer. It means prices go up. It means your savings get eroded. It puts jobs and livelihoods at risk. And that's why it's so important that we target it and get it down. That's why I said I wanted to halve it on its way to getting it back down to 2% where it belongs. And I am absolutely confident that if we hold our nerve and stick to our plan, we will do that.
I just don't think it's good enough anymore, is it, really? I just don't think it's good enough. You know, the way that people are facing homelessness now. People who've done nothing wrong. Gone are the days where you could go, oh, well, should you just give up the fags and the booze, mate? Or, you know, why don't you go from shopping at Waitrose to Lidl? Why don't you do all these little things? People who are really being affected now are people who are doing nothing wrong, actually, and haven't done anything wrong for the vast majority of their lives. And you look around and it's not very great, I think, for a Prime Minister to stand up and go, oh, don't worry, I'm on it, lads. I'm on it. Anyway, former Bank of England advisor Dr. Roger Gewolb joined me in the studio a little earlier on. If you missed it, well, you're going to have a second bite at the cherry here, because he says the current situation is outrageous.
Our 13th consecutive interest rate rise in a little over a year, taking us to 5%. People say, well, wait a minute, you know, interest rates were 14, 15% in the 80s. Hey, you know, calm down. Well, you know, read the Leeds Building Society and the other reports that have come out and said that a 6.4% mortgage today is the equivalent of a 25.7% mortgage in 1980. Tell me about those good old days, hey? I mean, this is outrageous. And both Mr. Bailey and the old lady of Threadneedle Street, Patrick, they've both got form in this. Bailey has been criticized for losing people billions by acting too slowly when he was running the Financial Conduct Authority in the Woodford crisis, in the London and Capital crisis, where they say he should have acted quicker. And the Bank of England, believe it or not, as long ago as the 1840s, reacted too slowly, didn't foresee inflation, and then did what Bailey is doing now, piled on a slew of interest rate rises and wrecked the economy.
Well, there we go. I mean, he went on and on, actually, but all in a very good way, and came up with some solutions that he said could be done in an afternoon. Go to our YouTube channel and go to Twitter at GB News. See that full interview, well worth a listen. But we want solutions now. As one of my old news editors at a different outlet, he says, stop coming to me with problems, come to me with solutions. All right, OK, well, what is the solution to this? Well, according to one former Chancellor, Spreadsheet Philip Hammond, who has re-emerged, it's more immigration. That's because allowing more people to enter the UK would provide more competition for jobs and stop lower paid workers demanding big pay rises. Here we go. So do you remember when we were told that mass immigration wasn't going to saturate the labour market? It hasn't been doing it. All of us who thought it was were all absolutely bonkers, and that it's not driving down wages. Yeah, well, it is, because it obviously is. And he's also a former Conservative Chancellor, and it completely ruins the idea that the Conservatives, at least when he was anywhere near power, of course, had any intention of bringing down immigration whatsoever, doesn't it? An absolute disaster. With me now is Stephen Wolfe, who's the Director of the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, Philip Hammond, back from the political wilderness to pipe up to say, I tell you what will solve this crisis, more immigrants so that we can stop people demanding better pay. It's bonkers.
So Philip Hammond is the equivalent of Andrew Bailey of the Treasury. He's basically somebody who is the walking dead with ideas that are actually dead wrong for this country. But have the kind of concept that you want to bring in mass immigration with lower wages is only the sort of comments that can be made from the very wealthy who would benefit most from having cheap labour. Maybe they should ask for cheaper servants again. Maybe they can just ask people working in coffee shops for nothing. Perhaps their builders can come round and do it just for £1 and a cup of coffee and a biscuit. Because that's the kind of mentality of anybody that suggests that we bring in large-scale migration to bring down wages. It's despicable, it's disgusting, and it's downright lunacy only of those who are so wealthy that they cannot see the consequences of low wages for people in this country.
I just think it's absolutely staggering. And again, it just exposes the lies that we were told. Oh, mass immigration to this country. Don't be silly saying that it's saturating the labour market and driving your wages down. Don't be silly that it's going to stop you getting a pay rise. And now here we are with a situation where they say, oh, well, there's no way that we can possibly start paying people more, so let's flood the market with even more mass immigration. We had 1.2 million people arrive in this country last year. 1.2 million people arrived in this country, and that's not enough for spreadsheet Phil. I would also just counter it by saying, where on earth are they all going to live, Phil? Where are they going to live? Look, Stephen, I am very sorry about this, but I am being told that we've got a little bit of a problem with your audio, my good man, so we're going to have to leave it there. I do apologise, but hopefully we can get it sorted. Stephen Wolfe, Director of the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity. Yeah, cop a load of this. We're being faced with an interest rate rise, inflation coming out of our eyeballs, and what is the creativity here? What is the solution? Shock horror? Well, it's just more migration. Is it, from Spreadsheet Phil? I find that absolutely baffling, to be honest with you, and I think it's actually really offensive. You get loads more on that story on our website, GBNews.com, the fastest growing national news site in the country. It's got all the best analysis, big opinion, and the latest breaking news. Now, I've just used the words breaking news. We've only gone and got some for you, and it concerns Prince George. GB News' royal correspondent, the wonderful Cameron Walker, is with me now. What is it?
Yeah, well, he has been spotted at Eton College with his father and mother, the Prince and Princess of Wales. Prince George is 9 years old. Eton College, the very prestigious, very expensive boarding school, very near Windsor. Boris Johnson went there, David Cameron, former Prime Ministers, and Prince William and Prince Harry as well. It's very prestigious, which suggests to me they are perhaps looking at Eton as an option for Prince George when he turns 13. So when he goes into year 8, that's when he would be expected to go there. He is currently at Lambrook School, which is just down the road, with him and his sister, Princess Charlotte, and his brother, Prince Louis, as well. But yeah, there's photographs on social media which appear to show them looking around it. But Kensington Palace have not commented officially.
They've not commented officially, but as we understand it, he's been looking around Eton. He said 13. I forgot posh people go to secondary school at 13, don't they?
Yeah.
Most of the people go at 11, I think, don't
Exactly, yeah. Most people go in year 7, but they an extra year in middle school, as it were, when you're at boarding school or a private school. But interestingly, on William's first day at Eton, there was this huge photo call, and they erected this massive scaffolding for all the photographers to take a photo of young Prince William on his first day, because the idea was that give the photographers what they want, a picture of the future king on his on his first day of school, and then the idea was you leave him alone to have a private schooling experience. And that's exactly what we've seen with William and Catherine and their children. On the 7th of September last year, on George, Charlotte and Louis's first day at Lambrook, the Prince and Princess of Wales did a photo call with them attending Lambrook School for the first time. And then, very sadly, the day after, the late Queen Elizabeth II died, and and Prince William had to fly up to Aberdeen last minute. But yes, my point being, obviously it's photo call and they want school to be a private place for the children to grow up in, but clearly they know that they're in the public eye, these children, and the media and the public want photographs of them on specific occasions.
Well, no, indeed. Well, thank you very much for bringing us that. More on that as we get it. I suppose, I wonder, I mean, they've got I would imagine, a massive waiting list at Eton. I'm sure they can find room for Prince George. Well, Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker there, GB News' royal correspondent. Cue the usual hysterical type saying, oh, God, it's privilege, you shouldn't be going to Eton. I mean, I would politely push back on that and say that at least it should be a relatively safe place for the lad. You wouldn't want to send him to Scumbag High down the road, would you? Just in case, because we might need him to be king one day, but there we are. Now, moving on to matters very, very serious indeed, because the search for 5 people trapped in the missing Titan submersible is getting more and more desperate now. But the rescue team is not giving up hope. We understood that potentially the oxygen supply was due to run out at about midday, but I had an expert on earlier who said it's not an exact science, so there is still hope. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, with the country in a right mess wherever you look, a little later this hour, I will be asking the pretty straightforward question, are we run by idiots? The emails have been flooding in on this, and I absolutely love to see it. I'll have a top guest and a top commentator just to expose wherever you look around the country at the moment. I'm not just talking about government, by the way, I mean opposition, but people whose job it is to deliver stuff like HS2 and things like the education system, and not just ministerial level, the people below them who are in charge. The Bank of England is a good place to start, isn't it? Are we being run by idiots? But now, to the latest on the search for the missing Titanic tourist submersible. And emergency oxygen levels on board the deep-sea vessel were sadly expected to run out this lunchtime. Downing Street has now confirmed that a Royal Navy submariner is helping the rescue attempt, and specialist equipment is also on its way from the UK. It has been confirmed as well that 19-year-old Suleiman Dawood, who is one of the 5 people missing, is a student at Strathclyde University. I am joined on this now for the very, very latest by GB News' national reporter Paul Hawkins. Yeah, Paul, as it stands then, still a search and rescue operation?
Still a search and rescue operation. Obviously, that crude deadline for the oxygen running out, that passed a while ago. But as we've always stressed, it was an approximate window because we don't know how long they could potentially stretch out that oxygen. The Rear Admiral of the US Coast Guard, John Morga, has been speaking to the media this afternoon. A few interesting lines to come out of that. On those noises that we were talking about yesterday, and there was some suggestion that they were SOS signals, he said that initial analysis by the US Navy suggests the sounds that were detected were generated by background ocean noise. They're not waiting for the full report to come from the US Navy. They're still carrying on with the search and rescue operation. But he's saying that at the moment, that's what the initial reports say. So background noise, which doesn't bode well. But there is what he describes as an active search and rescue operation, and they still remain hopeful at this point. We should also add that 2 ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, they've been deployed to the water. One of them, that Victor 6000 that was dropped off by a French research vessel that has arrived in the area, that is now scouring the bottom, scouring the seabed. It's joined by another ROV on the seabed as well. So there are 2 deep searching vehicles there. The French one, it does have mechanical arms, so if it were to come across the Titan, it could free it from any wreckage. It couldn't pull it to the surface by itself. It could, however, attach a cable, literally hook a cable to it to then pull it to the surface, which would take a couple of hours, and minutes and seconds are precious now. So those are the latest lines. And in terms of the British help on this, you mentioned that a submariner has been deployed as part of a team. We know that some cabling has been sent over. There's also the company Magellan, I should say. They are donating the ROV Juliet, but there were problems. Apparently it was ready to go on Monday. There were problems with permission from the American authorities. This morning they said they were going to deploy it. They've had problems literally getting it on the plane. The plane is not big enough to get it on.
This is the one
so they're
that...
having to get another plane out, and then I'm waiting for that plane to arrive.
And this is the one that we were saying has been sitting on the tarmac for however long. Why aren't we getting it out there? Why can't we get it out there? Is it being blocked? This is potentially a bit of a disgrace. They have now tried to get it on a plane and it won't fit.
No, it won't fit. So now they're having to send another plane, and obviously, I mean, one would have thought it's not going to arrive in time, but still, you never know how these things are going to pan out. Still worth deploying, I guess, but still a huge operation, international operation taking place at the moment, and they're remaining hopeful.
Yeah, indeed. And as I understand it, Paul, there is a little clip as well of a friend of one of the individuals on board.
Yeah, that's so Hamish Harding, his family have today said that there needs to be questions asked of OceanGate about why they took 8 hours to raise the alarm when it came to alerting the authorities about Titan going missing in the first place. His friend, Chris Brown, has also been speaking about the technical aspects, the technical questions he has and his experience of the vessel itself. Here's what he's had to say.
I wasn't happy with some of the design, like the thrusters on the outside with the cables there. I thought that was a snagging hazard. But what really did it for me was they flatly refused to get any form of certification. And it seemed that they had no intention of getting any certification for going down to those depths once, let alone several times. Where's the redundancy? Because it's normal in a vessel of any form that has human life, you've got redundancy of things. You usually have two of two, so you'd have a redundant separate system, and then you'd have two of those.
OK, so thank you very much for that, by the way, Paul. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter. Any updates, Paul will bring them to us live on this show. But I'm joined now by Dr. Jamie Pringle, who is a reader in forensic geosciences at Keele University. Great to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Is there any hope?
I mean, there's always hope. You know, statistically, the longer the time goes on, the less chances there are to find someone alive. But there have been cases before of fishermen found in vessels that have sank for several days. It's surviving in air pockets, but those ones have been in a lot shallower water. And as Paul was mentioning, the difficulties in locating the sub is still at that first initial point before the second one of trying to rescue it back to the surface.
Was enough done quickly enough, in your view? We are now talking about people trying to fly over a craft, a vessel from Jersey in the Channel Islands. Apparently that won't even fit on the plane, which is rather annoying. But that has been ready and waiting to go, supposedly, since Monday. You know, it's now Thursday. Has enough been done?
I guess, well, it's hard to speculate, isn't it? And why certain ones have been approved and have sent and other ones aren't, I'm not sure. And I guess there'll be obviously an investigation at the end to decide exactly what went well and what could be improved for subsequent surveys. I mean, it's not unusual if you have earthquakes and then you have rescue dogs. Often they take several days to get certified to approved to go and visit. And obviously you've heard of the golden hours. The first 24 hours are key in any search for any missing people. So that is problematic. But I guess in the fullness of time, they'll look at those.
When we look at the kind of environment that this submersible is believed to be in, which is presumably somewhere near the Titanic, obviously something has gone catastrophically wrong, and whether or not those people in there can make do for any longer without an ongoing supply of oxygen, which sadly was expected to have run out about 4 hours ago. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, isn't it? Physiologically, they've got a retired French diver on board, as I'm sure Paul has mentioned before, who will know all the details and ramifications of declining oxygen levels and what to do in certain situations. So whilst the estimates are that, I think they're still hoping that it sounds like at least from the US Coast Guard, they're still treating it as a search and rescue mission rather than a recovery.
OK, look, thank you very, very much, Jimmy. I'm sorry that it's a bit short and sweet. We've had a lot to cram in, but I've got no doubt I'll be talking to you again quite soon on this very topic, hopefully with some kind of happy ending. We'll have to wait and see. It's Dr. Jamie Pringle there, who's a reader in forensic geosciences at Keele University. Now, loads more to cram in as well between now and 5 o'clock, as millions count the cost of the Bank of England's big rate rise. I will ask, are we being run by idiots? And find out why staff from the controversial gender identity clinic are still offering treatment to vulnerable kids. I tell you what, it's a complete shocker, this story. Oh, and later on as well, I have got this former Scottish school pupil who was booted out of school for saying there are only two genders. I mean, good grief. But now it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Well, the top story this hour. Let's get on with turning our attentions to the North Atlantic then. And two remotely operated vehicles have joined the search for the missing tourist submersible there. The Victor 6000 has two mechanical arms which can carry out manoeuvres like cutting or removing debris, and a second powerful rescue vessel also being flown in from Jersey. Both of those rescue vessels can reach the seabed and transmit images back to the surface. We know 5 people are still inside that missing submersible. It lost contact with the surface on Sunday morning. The US Coast Guard says this remains, though, an active search and rescue operation. And some breaking news coming to us in the last half hour. 20,000 railway workers are due to go on strike for 3 days in July. The RMT union saying the industrial action will take place on the 20th, 22nd and 29th of July. It's all part of an ongoing national dispute over pay. More on that as it comes to us. But the main news today, apart from that, is that the Bank of England has raised the base rate of interest by half a percentage point to 5%. That's the highest rate in 15 years. The bank says it's trying to tackle ongoing price rises. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, said inflation is still too high and must be dealt with. But he added, if we don't raise interest rates now, it could be worse later. The Prime Minister says he's on it and it is going to be OK. This is the 13th time in a row the bank has increased interest rates. A man who allegedly smuggled thousands of people from Africa into Italy has been arrested in the UK. The 40-year-old Egyptian national was detained in London by the National Crime Agency. He's now being questioned on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration. More on all those stories, head to our website, gbnews.com.
Well, I ranted about this a little bit earlier on, but I'm returning to it now. It's a pretty simple question. In light of all of the economic and political news and everything that we talk about here, are we being run by idiots? The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey is rightly copping it today after the interest rate was increased to 5%. But he's not the only offender, is he? So the government does lurch from crisis to crisis. The opposition doesn't offer a proper alternative. And even bodies you should be able to rely on, like the police, seems to be more interested in diversity than protecting us. Every single place that we look in society right now, as far as I can tell, the cream has not risen to the top. I'm joined now by a man who's great at putting the world to rights, and it's the journalist and broadcaster, in my view, should be Sir Mike Parry. Mike, thank you very much. Are we being run by dribbling idiots?
Well, it's a very good question, Patrick, and let me put things into perspective. At the moment, the crisis in this country financially is because of Andrew Bailey, and Andrew Bailey is the governor of the Bank of England, right? So all the politicians walk away from it and say, well, you know, the Bank of England's independent. But the governor of the Bank of England can only be appointed on the recommendation of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Guess who was Chancellor of the Exchequer when Andrew Bailey was appointed? Yes, Sajid David, OK? A senior Tory politician. So when you say the bank are independent, they're not. The governing, you know, the people who are running the government put the Bank of England governor into power. He's been an absolute disaster. Carney, who was the previous governor of the Bank of England, he put so much money into the economy. When interest rates were down at sort of below 1%, he just kept quantitative easing. He kept pumping money in the economy when he should have been taking it out. So when Andrew Bailey was appointed as Mr. Carney's successor, he should have realised you've got to put the lid on this expansion of money in the economy, because expansion of money leads to inflation. What did Mr. Bailey do? He did nothing. And in fact, when inflation got up to just 3.5%, 4%, he said, don't worry, it's transitionary.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing to worry about. A bit of inflation now, it'll go soon. Now we're in the nightmare of people being trapped with massive mortgages they can't afford. When you've got interest at 1%, Patrick, and you borrow 95% of the cost of your £500,000 house, you are in clover. But when somebody says that goes up to 6% and it's trebled the payments, you are in desperate, desperate trouble. And the only job that the governor of the Bank of England has got, the governor who's appointed by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is to keep inflation down. You've asked the question, are they idiots? Yes, they are idiots.
Right, well, good stuff, Mike. We're off to a flyer here. Let's turn our attention now to our political class, shall we? Rishi Sunak's plans to cut the asylum seeker backlog have made things worse. We've got a leader of the opposition who takes the knee. We've got the leader of the Lib Dems who just goes missing more times than the hide-and-seek world champion. The former leader of the SNP is embroiled in a scandal which, of course, she denies, involving some money and possibly a camper van. The current leader of the SNP can't ride a scooter without falling off it. I mean, our politicians aren't any better, are they?
Listen, let me just return to the question, are they idiots? For instance, Mr. Bailey has got less qualifications in economics than I have. I got a grade D A-level pass in economics, right? Mr. Bailey spent most of his time at the universities of Warwick and Cambridge, I think, studying history and art. So the point I'm trying to make is I believe the common sense of individuals like me and like you and like the normal person who drives a white van and the taxi driver and the people who work on market stalls have more common sense about the way the economy works than any politician who waves away the threat of inflation because they're earning £650,000 a year and have no realistic grip on the life of the common man or woman in this country. That doesn't just mean the government. I mean, I know people are going to find this strange. We're in a terrible, terrible position at the moment. But I believe if we change governments and Keir Starmer gets in, Sir Keir Starmer, the man who's going to flood the Lords with a load of new barons, OK, I believe it'll be even worse when he gets in. And as for the situation in Scotland, well, it's like, it's like the Keystone Cops, isn't it? The whole of the political structure within the United Kingdom is broken, I would say, almost corrupt, and certainly not fit for purpose.
It's difficult, isn't it, to confirm how much Andrew Bailey actually earns a year because he won't tell you because he says he doesn't carry that figure around in his head. As I made the point earlier, he doesn't carry it around in his head. He takes it home in flipping wheelbarrows instead. But if you have a look here now at Andrew Bailey's dissertation topic, right, his dissertation, his thesis, sorry, I always get those two mixed up. His thesis, the impact of the Napoleonic Wars on the development of the cotton industry in Lancashire, a study of the structure of behaviour of firms during the Industrial Revolution. Put that man in charge of the economy. Flipping out, mate. But then also, we have a look around at some people as well. Let's move it on from... We've done the politicians, we've done the Bank of England. We can tie this all together, though. Let's have a look at things like HS2. It's supposed to be coming in the region of 100 billion quid, HS2, for a train that's going to get me to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker. Whoever's in charge of actually running this is absolutely... Who have we put in charge of this? How's that going? That's not running well, is it? It's like it's running through treacle.
Nobody holds their hands up and says, I'm in charge of this project when the project goes wrong, OK? The person you've got to blame for that is David Cameron, without a shadow of a doubt. The plans were already in place when David Cameron came to power in 2010 as the leader of the the Conservative and Lib Dem Pact, OK? And he had the opportunity to pull it then. He was told in those days it was 65 billion. It's now up to 120, but I'm talking to people and reading that another £70 billion might be needed to finish this project. And those trains, by the way, that you're talking about, the 14, 15 minutes quicker, won't run till 2040.
No, by which point they'll be out of date.
Biggest white elephant.
By which point they'll be out of date. I mean, you just go around the world, don't you? You cannot possibly tell me that it costs that much and takes that long to basically build a train track. It cannot. And then I have a look around as well. People like, let's just talk a bit about the military now. I've got a lot of time for our military heroes, don't get me wrong, but there are things that really wind me up. The RAF blocked some recruitment from people because essentially they were white and they didn't have enough diversity in their thing. Oh, idiots for doing this. This is the safety of the nation. Again, we're being run by idiots.
Yeah. Listen, another idiotic decision is about to take place, right? Ben Wallace, who I think was the man really, really qualified to lead NATO, probably won't get it now because Sleepy Joe Biden doesn't want him to do it because Sleepy Joe Biden is very anti-British. He seems to tarnish his Irish credentials. Why, I have no idea. But it looks like Ben Wallace isn't going to get it. The military in this country is in a terrible state. Let me tell you this, Patrick, right? I live down on the south coast and occasionally a US aircraft carrier pulls into the Solent and parks there for a couple of days because the ships are too big to go into Portsmouth Harbour, OK? When you go and look at them, as people do, there are 90 fighter aircraft parked on the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. 90. They've got 13 aircraft carriers. Do you know how many fighter aircraft the RAF have got? 180. So we've got just twice the number of aircraft that one US aircraft carrier parks in our Solent. That's how badly organised this country is now.
Yep, and let's have a look, shall we? I think we've just about got time to one of the key topic of yours. It's the old net zero agenda, isn't it? We've got people giving advice to the government and giving advice to the British public. They want to cost us something along the lines of £350 billion to hit this big net zero agenda. We had to turn some solar panels off the other day because it was too sunny. I think...
We used to mock solar panels because the sun only shone 5 or 6 days a year to make them work. So we have a heat wave and they burn up and they don't work. We know windmills don't work. The greatest damnation of our policy on net zero is that even the Europeans have pushed back their target to 2035, but we're still stuck on 2030. It's ludicrous.
Yeah. Smart motorways, or just one more, Mike, and I will let you get going in a second. Smart motorways, it's just an excuse to not presumably get any planning permission to build an extra lane. We'll rip your hard shoulder out. We'll put some cameras on there that are supposed to be able to see if there's a traffic jam. What happens? Well, they steam up, so we have to spend a bit of time pointing them at the sun. Meanwhile, people get thundered into by a Polish lorry driver.
That's right. Who was the idiot, whichever department it was, presumably the Department of Transport, who called this idea smart motorways?
Yeah.
I would have called them the thickest idea ever to have come out of the Department of Transport. So I would call them thickhead motorways because they kill people. They cut down on your ability to feel safe and secure in your car in this country. And it's another scandal of badly run government. The thing is, Patrick, though, we've been slating the current government. I've already had a pop at what could be the future government. Who do I, as a right-thinking, not politically, but right-thinking, intelligent citizen in the United Kingdom, who do I go to and vote for to make this country run properly?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is the thing. We're being let down. This is it. And you could take your pick. There's loads of other things we can get stuck into now. And it isn't just the government, like you said, the opposition. It's also the people that the government and the opposition will go to for advice on stuff. It just seems to me like people are just rising to the top without any kind of qualifications or aptitude whatsoever. Mike, thank you. Enjoyed that thoroughly. Mike Parry there, journalist, broadcasting legend, friend of the show, friend of the channel. Right, OK, so... the controversial Tavistock Gender Clinic, you'll remember this one. We got into a lot of trouble. I'll tell you why in a second. But that's closing. But staff from there are still working with vulnerable kids confused about their gender. They're going to set up a private clinic. It's all very weird, this. And I will be talking as well to a lad who was booted out of school for saying there were only 2 genders. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
the Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, right, so I think we all thought we'd seen the back of a lot of the old gender nightmare, hadn't we? But sadly not. By the way, just a little throw ahead before I talk about all of that topic. I will have the latest now on that desperate search, that deep-sea vessel that's still missing near the wreck of the Titanic. Experts have warned that their oxygen supply was due to run out a few hours ago. I will keep you up to date on that as I get a little bit more info fed through to me here. But yes, as I was saying, we were told that the Tavistock Clinic, which was this gender reassignment clinic, it got shut down over safety fears, and I think we can all understand why. But we assumed that it would put a stop to gender ideology running rampant in the NHS, puberty blockers being handed out to kids. But now, staff from that controversial facility, what are they going to do? They're going to set up a private gender clinic. Yeah, so a new clinic says it offers referrals for hormones and surgery delivered by many staff members who previously worked at the Tavistock Centre and came under fire for its gender-affirming attitudes and a rush to medicalise kids. So previously, in a nutshell, a child, sometimes with autism, sometimes with other mental health problems, sometimes just with whatever, would go in from a young age and essentially be allowed to medically transition, permanently disfigure themselves and make massive, massive decisions about their own well-being. That clinic was criticised and shut down. So then what do some of those doctors do? They go and set up a private clinic. I think that's pretty sinister. With me to discuss this now is journalist and author, it's Helen Joyce. Helen, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Does this clinic now, this new clinic, not need to be looked at? It's called Gender Plus. It's a private gender service that accepts referrals for children, adolescents and adults. I'm sorry, but are these people obsessed with making kids change gender?
I mean, they think they're doing the right thing and they're not listening to all the evidence that shows that they're not. I mean, the Tavistock is still open. It's in the process of being wound down, but the transfer to the 2 new clinics that are meant to be replacing it and that
Helen,
have much
I'm really
tighter
sorry.
specs has taken longer.
OK, Helen, I'm really sorry, Helen. Just stay there for me, please, if that's OK. I just have some big breaking news that I need to bring to people now. So this has just come my way. The US Coast Guard says a debris field has been discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Experts within the Unified Command are evaluating the information. I'll bring that to you one more time. This is the breaking news, and it's in relation to that Titan submersible, where there's been this desperate search and rescue operation taking place now for a number of days. The latest is this. The US Coast Guard says a debris field has been discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Experts within the Unified Command are evaluating the information. I'm hoping that we might be able to try to get someone on about that very, very shortly, just to expand on that for us a little bit. I will give you as much information as I possibly can as we get it. Look, I'm just going to bring Helen back in. Helen, look, I'm very sorry about that to cut across you straight away, but we will be returning to that story shortly. Look, as you were saying, Helen, sorry, I'll let you just take it from here. Do you think that this is a serious concern that doctors are now so keen to essentially, well, some would argue, mutilate kids?
So these doctors do think they're doing the right thing. I think the evidence is overwhelmingly that they're not. They are basically sidestepping the tighter protocols that the NHS is trying to put in place as it shifts from the Tavistock, which, as you say, is in the process of being shut down, by going private. And they're not the only ones. There are other private doctors. There's Gender GP, which offers a few online sessions, just a few Zoom consultations, at the end of which you can get a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. They give you a prescription for puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones, which you can then bring to your NHS GP and ask to have it transferred into an NHS prescription. So, it seemed to be laughably easy to go around this overarching decision that this medication has not been proven to be effective, that we have very serious safety concerns about it, and that the right approach is to really drastically cut down on its use and to allow it, if at all, only in proper research protocols. And yet we see people just sidestepping this by setting up online. I think that the authorities, the medical licensing authorities, should be the ones to look at this. Is this suitable? Is this right?
OK, exactly. Helen, look, thank you very, very much for that. I do apologise again for that being quite short. I do hope you understand that, of course, we had some quite big breaking news there. Yes. On a rolling story. Helen, thank you very much. It's Helen Joyce there, who is journalist and author. Look, that was in relation to a story. I will be returning to that story, which is about the gender issue affecting children. And I will have a former Scottish school pupil on in the next hour who's going to be discussing about the fact that they were booted out of school for telling a teacher that they had two genders. But I want to return to this big breaking news story now. I think we've got to go to it, really, which is, of course, some big news. The US Coast Guard says that a debris field has been discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. This is in relation, of course, to that Titan submersible. It went missing over the weekend. Ever since then, there's been this ticking clock. We believed, anyway, as we understood that the oxygen supply was potentially running out, with 5 people on board, a couple of them British, a couple of them kind of adopted British as well, it must be said. Now, this is according to the US Coast Guard. It's just landed in front of us right now, which is that apparently debris has been discovered. And here to give us a bit more info is Paul Hawkins, our national reporter. Yeah, so, Paul, this is the big breaking line, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a potentially very significant line coming out. This debris field discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Now, we know that the search area was quite big. They hadn't narrowed it down. Yeah. They potentially could have narrowed it down to as little as 100 metres, but it was still fairly large. But it does say that it is near the Titanic, and it's been picked up by one of the remote-operated vehicles, those, that have been brought in, dropped into the water. So experts within the Unified Command, they're looking at the information. And we've just learned that there will be a press briefing at 3 o'clock.
That's 3 o'clock time, isn't it?
It was their time, which I believe makes it 8 o'clock our time.
Okay.
I think that's 8 p.m. our time. So, yeah, we'll be hearing from Rear Admiral John Morga, who I spoke about earlier. He's the first Coast Guard District Commander. Also Captain Jamie Frederick, the first Coast Guard District Response Coordinator. He's the man that's been giving the briefings every day this week. But yeah, a potentially huge development this afternoon, and that taking place at I think that's 8 p.m. Our time. It's 5 hours ahead.
Yes, indeed. I would imagine we will be bringing you that live if we can here on GB News. Just to fill you in again, yes. So when we first started the show, as we understood it, the clock was ticking in terms of the oxygen supply on this particular craft, this submersible that was believed to have been somewhere near the wreckage of the Titanic, with 5 people on board. That oxygen supply was supposed to have run out at around midday today. I believe we can actually go to Newfoundland now, I think, which is this. So this is the harbour, St John's Harbour. And this is where a lot of the search and rescue operations were kind of starting from, and will be kind of spilling out there, obviously, miles offshore towards the Titanic. And Paul, what they did, especially today, was they had more crafts in the water looking and searching, and it's believed that an ROV has now found some debris. So what does that really mean for people?
So ROV stands for Remotely Operated Vessel, and essentially it's these little sort of small machines that they drop into the water. 2 have been deployed to the water today. We don't know. One of them is the Victor 6000. Yep. That's the state-of-the-art French ROV, brought by the Latente, I think it is. That's been deployed to the water, state-of-the-art, visual sensors, audio sensors, and crucially robotic arms, so that we were hoping, still are hoping, we don't know what this debris is, that it would be able to potentially hook something onto the Titan and help it to the surface, or at least free it from some kind of wreckage. The other ROV was deployed earlier from the Horizon, I think it was. So 2 ROVs in the water. We don't know which one has found this debris field, but yeah, that's the state of play at the moment. And of course, not just ROVs in the water, they've been sweeping the area with reconnaissance from the air as well, and dropping sonar buoys as well, which is how we heard those sound recordings, which earlier actually, from John Morga earlier, was saying that these sound recordings, we think, he was saying that the initial analysis was that they were most likely to be just background ocean noise.
Yeah, no, indeed, because that was a kind of ray of hope, wasn't it, I think, for a lot of people at the time yesterday. And important to emphasise, so what the US Coast Guard is saying is that as a debris field has been found. Now, this could well turn out to be something else. Of course, it is near the Titanic, and therefore you fear the worst. But for a long time, there was a bit of hope yesterday, wasn't there? As we thought we might have been hearing some kind of SOS signal. We thought that might indicate that the people were still alive on board. We have to wait for confirmation. Hopefully we get some kind of press conference relatively soon, potentially around 8 p.m. UK time, maybe a bit earlier, if indeed there is some confirmation as to what indeed this debris is. This will be absolutely galling for the families of people who have just been waiting days for any kind of news, and potentially now we will be fearing the worst.
Yeah, and one would have, I mean, we know that these ROVs are fitted with video cameras, right? Extremely sophisticated video cameras that give high resolution images. They will have been seeing exactly what the ROV picks up. Now, I'm no expert on this, but you would have thought they would be able to tell the difference between something that was made in the last 5 years, in the modern day, and something from the Titanic that's been lying at the bottom of the Atlantic since 1912. So they will have seen what the ROV will have seen. But as we say, a unified command, they will be analysing that information. Now they'll have experts from the US Navy poring over those pictures from the command centre in Boston. And then we will, and that is where we will get that press briefing at 8 o'clock this evening. Yeah,
and so many different theories as to what could have happened. Initially on this show on Tuesday, I was talking to an expert who said to me categorically at the time, he was like, look, what I think will have happened is that unfortunately there might have been some kind of breach in the port side where apparently there was some welding that is done together there, and that would have been a potential weakness. Well, then literally the next expert that I had afterwards said it's probably at the bottom of the sea, out of power but intact. We've spoken to a few people today who think that there was a ray of hope with these SOS signals, and others who are saying, look, it was just background noise in the ocean and we don't really know. And then the latest is that breaking line, which is that supposedly a debris field has now been found in that search area. It is such a vast area, of course, as well, isn't it? And those searches are going to continue.
Yeah, and just one other thought, they won't purely go on the visual images. One would have thought they would try and use the ROVs to collect some of that debris and bring it to the surface. That potentially could be quite tricky, depending on the size of the pieces of the debris. It'll take a couple of hours to bring back to the surface. That's probably why it's 8 o'clock, we're expecting that briefing. It's 5 o'clock now, so 3 hours. If they can retrieve some of that debris and look at it, that'll give them a better idea about confirmation of what it is when we get to 8 o'clock this evening, UK time.
Exactly. Can I just ask you, Paul, if it's all right, just to stick around with me in the studio for a minute as we just possibly get a few more different lines to it. I'm just going to go to Martin Blythe Sweetingham now, who's a spokesperson for the British Titanic Society, just to get an initial reaction from you, please, to this breaking news that the US Coast Guard has said that a debris field has been found in that search area where they were looking for Titan.
Good evening. Yes, of course, we've naturally been praying and hoping for good news as a collective of worldwide Titanic enthusiasts for the last few days, ever since the news broke that the Titan was missing. I know that as a collective now we will be deeply concerned following the recent announcement by the US Coast Guard that a debris field has been found. Obviously, it's unconfirmed as of yet whether this is in fact Titan, but as your co-host just then was saying, you would expect with the quality of the camera work available on this ROV that they would be able to tell a distinct difference between debris which are, from 1912 and those which are much more modern, and even those from maybe 5 years ago, as you've just said. Naturally, the British Titanic Society, we're all concerned about the news, but we must await that update from the US at 8 o'clock this evening.
How you feel yourself, or on behalf of the British Titanic Society, really, about people going on these kind of expeditions, really? I suppose there is a school of thought that says this is fascinating and should be done, and it's also great in a kind of exploratory sense, because we don't know huge amounts about the seabed, for example, and any more information could be great. However, there is maybe another school of thought as well that says the Titanic is, a historic graveyard, really, and maybe should be left alone. What do you think?
I absolutely understand both points of view. In fact, as a society, we don't have a single viewpoint on these particular missions. We, as a society, have members who are, in fact, descendants of both survivors and those who unfortunately lost their lives back in April 1912. And as a result, we listen to all of their perspectives. Some people do believe this is a mass grave site, and therefore they wish that their relatives' graves and bodies and souls were left to lay at rest and in peace. Yes, again, we have other perspectives whereby people are frustrated that those on board this particular mission on the Titan are being labelled as tourists. Many believe they are scientists. They're going down to explore the depths of the sea, to find out more about the Titanic wreckage. And naturally, there's a worldwide fascination with the Titanic, whether that's because the story was introduced to you as part of the British national curriculum at school, or maybe you do have a personal link with the Titanic in your own family. There's huge interest in this, and I wouldn't want to criticise any individual for making a decision to go down there, because we know people all around the world who go on great expeditions, whether that's climbing Mount Everest or visiting the Valley of the Kings, which is essentially another mass grave site. So we must respect all people's perspectives, but naturally everybody, no matter what their stance on visiting the wreckage, is united in their grief in relation to what has potentially happened here with Titan.
And the exact nature of this search and rescue operation epitomises why the Titanic, I think, maybe captured people's, imaginations and the news agenda, etc., because as well of how remote this area is. We've seen that a French deep-sea robot, Victor 6000, that has been deployed. The Canadian vessel Horizon Arctic has also been deployed with its own ROV. That was apparently, interestingly, on the sea floor. We're just getting a bit more information here now, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. The fact that we're having to try to fly so many international resources in the length of time it's taken to get things there just shows, really, how remote and how, if things go wrong, dangerous the area where the Titanic is.
Absolutely. As we know, technology has improved since the Titanic sunk, but it took 73 years to find the wreckage itself. And consequently, exploring the sea at those depths is never going to be easy. I'm sure we've heard lots over the last few days that the pressure at the exterior of the Titan, down at those depths of 3,800 meters, would have been about 3.5 tons per cubic inch. So the pressure at those levels is incredible. Sunlight doesn't penetrate any further than 1,000 meter deep. So the conditions which the rescue operation are having to work with in an area double the size of the state of Connecticut is obviously a vast challenge.
OK, all right. Well, look, Martin, thank you very, very much. He's Martin Blythe-Sweetskin there, who's the spokesperson for the British Titanic Society. And can I just ask, Martin, sorry, before I let you get going, there was something that I think you said to me, though, was that right, about the members of the British Titanic Society being relatives, descendants of people who survived and sadly didn't survive during the initial disaster, I suppose you could call it.
We have members from all around the world, and some of our members, not all of them, but some of them are descendants of people who are on board the Titanic. Early this year, our annual convention in Southampton, I met with direct relatives of those people who unfortunately were on board. So again, their perspective will always be different to those who are maybe only connecting with the Titanic through their love of the James Cameron film or learning about it at school.
No, exactly. And I do wonder whether or not, as well, certain members of the British Titanic Society will, be uniquely placed to feel desperately, as that breaking news emerged that debris has been found. We are awaiting confirmation as to whether or not this is Titan. We'll have to wait and see on that. But the word itself doesn't make it seem particularly good. But whether or not members of the British Titanic Society will be uniquely placed to really send their hearts out, really, to the relatives of the people who were on board Titan, Hamish Harding being one of them, Paul-Henri Nagelet, Mr Titanic, as he was known, Stockton Rush, the CEO of Ocean Gate, and then, of course, as well, we've got the two Darwoods, the father and the son just 19, a student at Strathclyde University as well. And I just wondered maybe if there is a bit of a message from the British Titanic Society for the relatives of the people who potentially are on Titan.
Absolutely. For the last few days since the news broke, we've obviously extended our thoughts and prayers to the people on board Titan, but also their friends and family as well. We can't even begin to imagine the grief and worry and anxiety they're experiencing, but we can assure them that we are united in that. And whatever the outcome of this search and rescue operation, we will always remember the legacy of this expedition.
Martin, thank you. Martin Blyer tweeting him there, spokesperson for the British Titanic Society. Really poignant stuff. Paul Hawkins is still with me in the studio, our national reporter. So, just this big breaking news. If you are joining us, the US Coast Guard says that debris has been found, a debris field has been found near their search area, within their search area. Paul, what is the latest, please?
Yeah, that is the latest. Really, we're waiting now for that press conference, which is due at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as usual, as has been the case every evening this week in Boston. That's 8 p.m. Our time. We will be hearing from the US Coast Guard. And hopefully the big question is, what have they found? And one would have thought they're going to try and retrieve some of that debris, bring it to the surface using one of the ROVs, and then they'll be able to get a look at it firsthand. I was just going to mention as well, but you've done it already, Patrick, that really thoughts are with the family and friends of those 5 men right now, and you just cannot imagine what they are going through. And we were talking about relatives as well, relatives of those. It has emerged that the wife of Stockton Rush, the chief executive of Ocean Gate, who was on the Titan, Wendy Rush, is the great-great-granddaughter of 2 people who died on the Titanic, Isidore Strauss and his wife, Ida. So that's just something to bear in mind. And we can only imagine what those families are going through right now as they wait for confirmation from the Coast Guard, who I imagine will be telling them first, certainly one would hope so, before they tell the rest of the world. What they found, it may not be what it is. It doesn't sound good. It sounds ominous, but we wait for confirmation from the Coast Guard later this evening in just under 3 hours' time.
Absolutely. I've got a statement here from Tim Moulton, who is a Titanic expert, and he has said, if it is debris from the Titan sub, then it sounds like the sub could have imploded at or near the Titanic wreck due to extreme water pressure at that depth. So that is a Titanic expert, Tim Moulton, who said that if it is debris from the Titan sub, then it sounds like the sub could have imploded at or near the Titanic wreck due to extreme water pressure at that depth. That would echo, actually, the statements made by an expert on this show a few days ago, who seemed to indicate that because it is so deep down and it is so much pressure there, unbelievably pressurised environment, that if there are any flaws whatsoever with the vessel, then it can essentially implode. That also might explain why it's taken a while to actually rise to the surface.
Yeah, and interestingly, Stockton Rush, the CEO of Ocean Gate, in the past he's done a number of interviews talking about these 8-day expeditions to the wreck of the Titanic. He was asked by one podcast what worried him most about the depths of the ocean, and he said, what I worry about most are things that will stop me from being able to get to the surface. Overhangs, fish nets, entanglement hazard. He said he wasn't really bothered about things like thrusters not working or the lights fading, because as long as you can still get back to the surface, you'd be okay. He said, I don't think, when he's talking about the safety of the missions, I don't think it's very dangerous. If you look at submersible activity over the last 3 decades, there hasn't even been a major injury, let alone a fatality. What worries us is not once is not when you're under the water. What worries me is about getting there when you're on the ship in icy states with big doors that can crush your hands and people who may not have had the best balance who fall down and bang their heads. So it does seem that what worried him most was, in terms of when the Titan gets to the bottom of the ocean, is getting entangled in the wreckage and being unable to make its way back to the surface. But that expert, they're sort of speculating that it could be potentially a problem with the strength of the hull, the integrity of the hull.
This is it.
We don't know. No. We don't know yet, and that's why we'll all be glued to our sets at 8 o'clock.
Absolutely. Well, look, just to recap. This broke just before 5 p.m. It was a tweet from the US Coast Guard, and it said this: a debris field was discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Experts within the Unified Command are evaluating the information. The US Coast Guard will hold that news conference at 8 p.m. UK time. I am joined now by Mike Wellham, who is a marine operations specialist. Thank you very much. Based on what little information we have just been provided with now, what are your thoughts?
Well, essentially, we don't have any information. They found something on the seabed. They're presuming that it's not part of the Titanic debris that's down there.
Can I just stop you there, Mike? Sorry to interrupt you immediately, but I just want to clarify something, because you will know much better than me about this. So, as you understand it, what they have found is on the seabed, not on the surface.
I've got no idea. I know as much about this. It's just been landed on me, and my phone has been going berserk.
Okay.
And I'm now talking to you. All I know there is debris, and it seemed to be linked in to the ROV. So that's what I'm assuming, that they found something on the seabed close to the Titanic.
Right, OK. Well, that would make a lot of sense. Obviously, I'm sure all of our viewers and listeners will appreciate that this is very much a fast-paced, rolling news story, so we'll keep you up to date as any information comes that way. But let's just assume that is the case at the minute, Mike. Why not? And that might imply, then, as one expert was saying, that there had been some kind of implosion, maybe due to pressure?
Oh, definitely. It wasn't carrying anything, I think, that we know of that would cause it to explode anyway. The pressure is tremendous down there. You know, it's unbelievable, and it could have pushed in the port to start with, because that's if you want a weakness on a mini sub, but then it will have squashed it, and the sort of pressure it could have squashed it flat.
Gosh, okay.
So that's what I mean, we don't know at the moment. Where once they get footage coming in, which they will have. I mean, if the ROV's down there, it will it'll take video footage of it. They'll get as much identification of it to make confirmation. So nobody that's out there or the US Coast Guard is going to say anything until they have absolute evidence of what they've discovered.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, we were all, to be fair, none the wiser about this until the US Coast Guard have, of their own volition, decided to tweet something out, which clearly does sound pretty ominous in terms of this debris field. You were talking about the ROV there as well. Yeah. What one expert was saying that apparently it's like walking around a really dark ballroom with a flashlight, this ROV. So it will have video cameras on it. It does have video cameras on it. And so potentially then they've already had quite a good look at what they've discovered here, and, well, reading between the lines, they have then gone to the trouble of tweeting that they have found a debris field and that they are holding a press conference at 8 p.m. So it's not necessarily looking great.
Yeah, well, the ROV itself, it will have banks of lights on there. It will have a manipulator, at least one, that can be controlled from inside, from the surface. It's got the lights. It's got the cameras as well, and they'll have a variety of different cameras that they can use, and they will actually then video it, and that will be transmitted up to the support ship, and then they can pass that on then to the appropriate authorities, who will look at it and then start making decisions.
And this is the field around the wreck of the Titanic as we understand it. And a lot of people will be thinking, well, how has it taken maybe this long? But I suppose that was predominantly because it took these craft quite a long time to get there initially, was it really? And also the Titanic itself, famously, is rather large.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was this morning that we logged in that, the first ROV, the French one, the big one, had got down there. They have to orientate themselves. They have to actually find the Titanic themselves, and then once they're there, they can get their bearings, and then they can then move the ROV. The ship itself will likely move with it, because if you can imagine, it's already got an umbilical out to get it to the seabed. So they won't want to put a lot more umbilical down. They'll try and move the ship as well, because once you've got a lot of umbilical out, it can get fouled on the other debris from the Titanic itself. So it's a very cautious and careful operation. They're not going to rush for that. They'll do it in a controlled manner, and get, once they found the debris there. I would suggest the fact that the Coast Guard has actually made mention of it would indicate that what they found and the initial reports are that it's fresh debris. It's not part of the Titanic itself, which is covered in marine growth. So that's all I can say at the moment, really. That that's what I would suggest, that they found debris, but they will really want to confirm it before they make any further statement.
Look, I don't know whether or not you've been involved in anything quite like this, Mike. It does seem like a relative one-off, but in your capacity as a marine operations specialist, when you are searching for something and you think you might have found something, what's the normal protocol that it goes to, especially when it comes to discussing with relatives and loved ones and those people who are close to the situation?
Well, I would suggest here that they found the debris earlier. The Coast Guard will have been in touch with the family. That would be the normal protocol. They would be in touch with the people that matter, and that is the family and any other person in that sort of link. And they will discuss with them what they found, and then with their permissions, then they will go public to make an announcement. But they're all being cautious, and I understand they're being cautious, and I agree with it. Until we've actually got it identified, then, I mean, they may well have identified it, but they're not telling us yet. We don't know.
Look, Mike, as well, if, as indeed the breaking news would suggest, that there's a debris field that appears to have been found quite possibly on the ocean floor near the Titanic, given that the chance of survival was relatively small to begin with, and some of the options as to what could have happened there could well have been quite slow and long-winded, Mike. Potentially, you don't want to be too morbid about it, but potentially this could be, arguably maybe the best of a series of very, very bad options for those who were on board if there was no real chance of them escaping anyway.
Yeah, in a catastrophic situation like that with an implosion, it's instant. They will virtually have not known anything about it. It will be bang, and the pressure will concertina the sub itself.
OK, look, Mike, thank you very much. If I could just ask you, if that's all right, just to hold on the line for me for a couple of minutes. I know you're a busy man and everyone's probably trying to get hold of you right now, but I don't want to lose you just in case we get any other little developments quickly. It's Mike Wellham there. He's a marine operations specialist. Okay. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter, is with me in the studio. Just to recap this breaking news story that the Titanic subsearch, the Titan subsearch, really, I should say, the US Coast Guard has just tweeted to say that they have found a debris field. There is going to be a news conference at 8 p.m. UK time about this, which is a couple of hours after. And Paul, what we're hearing is that an ROV has detected this debris field. They will have video on that. That video will be being processed at the moment, but it's not looking great, is it?
Yeah, and possibly they might try to, depending on which ROV has discovered this debris, depending on its capability, maybe they might try to. Certainly you would have thought if the ROV has the capability, then they would try to actually bring some of the debris to the surface, because they will want to be, as Mike was saying, they'll want to be 100% sure about what is on there. They won't just want visual confirmation, they'll literally want to see it in their hands and touch it. So just to repeat what the US Coast Guard have tweeted, this is their exact words: a debris field was discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Experts within the Unified Command are evaluating the information, and then they've said that there'll be that press briefing at 8 p.m. We should, by the way, say that search field was quite large.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been as little as 100 metres. It was somewhere from 1 to 2 kilometres. It was a fairly wide area, and we know that the wreckage of the Titanic sits in two parts, about 600 metres apart, with a debris roughly in two chunks, and then with a debris field around each of them. So it's spread over quite a wide area, because of course the ocean currents over the decades have moved it around. So it's quite a wide area. So yeah, we will wait to hear what they say, but it doesn't sound good, but let's hear what the US Coast Guard have to say.
Well, more as we get it, but we actually spoke to Chris Brown, who is a friend of missing passenger Hamish Harding. That is that British billionaire who's on board. And this was before the news broke, but he actually cancelled his own trip on the Titan over safety concerns. So bear in mind that this chap was supposed to really be on Titan now. Here's what he had to say.
Parts of the submarine that I'd seen in the testing in the Bahamas just seemed a bit shoddy. They're using industrial piping for ballast. They're using an Xbox controller for the steering. The strip lightings, something you get at a DIY shop. Small cramped surfaces. I wasn't happy with some of the design, like the thrusters on the outside with the cables there. I thought that was a snagging hazard. But what really did it for me was they flatly refused to get any form of certification. And it seemed that they had no intention of getting any certification for going down to those depths once, let alone several times.
Yeah, and it has massively divided opinion whether or not trips like this should even exist, it's fair to say, and whether or not it was ever safe, which, in light of what we are potentially witnessing unfolding now at the moment after debris has been found, that might go a long way to answering that question. Christys did not want to be on that trip. He got his deposit back, asked for his deposit back. It is a huge sum of money that it cost to have taken this trip, somewhere in the region of $250,000, which is why a lot of the people on this trip are indeed billionaires. And I think at this particular moment in time now, as it's emerged that an ROV has quite possibly found debris that may well be Titan somewhere near the wreckage of the Titanic, I think it's worth us just reminding ourselves who is missing and who was on Titan. And Paul, you've obviously got some of the background info now, Paul Hawkins, about some of the people who were on Titan.
Yes, these are 5 men ages from 19 to 73 years old. We know 3 of them are used to exploring the deep oceans. They are Hamish Harding is a British businessman and explorer, owner of 3 Guinness World Records. He's been to space. He's been to the ocean before, experienced explorer, even more experienced than him, Paul Henri Nageolet is a French explorer, 73 years old, known as Mr. Titanic, first visited the Titanic in 1987. He's been down there many times, helped to retrieve items from the Titanic himself. And then, of course, who we assume was piloting the craft, the chief executive of OceanGate. They're the company that own the Titan, Stockton Rush as well, whose wife, Wendy, is the great-great-granddaughter of a couple who died on the Titanic, and who said in previous interviews with the media, he said, you know, at some point, safety is just pure waste. If you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. But thoughts as well with the two people on board who are not seasoned explorers, who will have not been in that situation before, Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son, Suleiman. He's a Pakistani businessman, but he's been living in the UK for many years, living in Surrey. He's an advisor to the Prince's Trust International, very much love, very much light, and thoughts and prayers with all those 5 men, their families and friends right now. I can't imagine what they're going through.
Yeah, 100%. Deeply, deeply distressing. He's an interesting character, this Stockton Rush, and you have to be to try to even think about attempting trips like this. Clearly a visionary, clearly somebody with a deep passion for this. He's the CEO of OceanGate Expeditions. He did apparently once say, this is according to reports, that he didn't want to hire 50-year-old white guys because they are not inspirational enough. He also said that the craft, as you said there, basically saying that safety is important, but also that you don't get out of bed in the morning, if you're too afraid of absolutely everything. So he's clearly, a real intrepid explorer at his heart. There's the 61-year-old CEO of OceanGate Expeditions, who is still missing, along with the other 4 passengers. Now, yesterday, I had a remarkable conversation with a chap called Mike Rees, who is the writer of The Simpsons, is one of the writers of The Simpsons. Now, he visited the wreck of the Titanic last July on this same craft, so on Titan. Paid rather a lot of money for it. He was also joined by his wife, Denise, who had been due to make the same trip but couldn't go after she tested positive for COVID. Now, I did put to them a few things. Firstly, even if the worst-case scenario happens, which sadly may well be the case given this breaking news that we're talking about right now, would they still go? They said that they would still go. They also did describe a lot of the safety fears that are now being spewed out across the press. He just didn't care about the safety fears. I think we've got a little bit of a clip of this interview now.
A lot of talk is going on about the safety of the vessel. It is a very, very risky proposition. There's anyone who booked this trip knew it was going to be risky. You sign a lengthy waiver that lists really 100 ways to die, things that could go wrong. So everyone walks into this with open eyes, and it just sinks to the bottom of the ocean by gravity, and then when you're done exploring, you release weights and you bob to the surface with buoyancy. It's extremely low tech, which I liked about it. It was a beautiful experience. It's something to know. And despite the fact that death was looming, and despite the fact that this is the most exciting thing I've ever done, I fell asleep on the way down. It was just it was dimly lit. It was quiet. Everyone was calm, that I actually dozed off until we hit the floor of the ocean.
I've got to ask, Denise, Mike managed to get down there and Mike managed to see the Titanic. If everything goes well and these people are rescued, Denise, would you go back on that vessel and go and try to find the Titanic, do you think?
I was considering doing it again this year, and I was coaxing another friend of mine to come, with whom I've been in touch. Yes, I think I would do it. I might try to do this again.
What was fascinating for me is the longer version of that interview online, by the way, is that he was talking to me about how when he was falling down through the ocean, how he fell asleep. But I asked Denise what she would have been feeling like if the worst-case scenario had happened and if people were missing and if Mike had gone missing. And she was saying to me that she actually would have been distraught, but she would have been OK because he'd taken a notepad and a pen with him and he was just going to write his last jokes down there as the writer of The Simpsons. And I think sometimes the psychology of these people I find almost as fascinating as the work that they do themselves. But back to the matter in hand, anyway. This story that broke just after 5 o'clock, a tweet from the US Coast Guard which reads this: a debris field was discovered within the search area by an ROV near the Titanic. Experts within the Unified Command are evaluating this information. There will be a press conference which we will endeavour to take live on GB News at 8 p.m. UK time. Tim Moulton, who is a Titanic expert, had this to say. He said, if it is debris from the Titan sub, then it sounds like the sub could have imploded at or near the Titanic wreck due to extreme water pressure at that depth. Now, Mike Wellham has kindly been sitting on the line for a very long time. I'm going to return to Mike now. He's a marine operations specialist. Look, thank you very much, Mike. What are going to be the chances of recovering any of this wreckage, do you think, if indeed it is, of course, the Titan?
If it's sitting on the seabed, the ROV, the types of ROVs they're putting down there are equipped to recover items of debris, and they can do. But that's quite a logistical challenge because you have to put a lifting wire down from the surface, and that's got to be put to the wreckage, and then it will be attached to the wreckage. So it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick job, but it can be done. And I've been in where we've actually put wires down to a thing on the item on the seabed and attached it and lifted it. So it is something that's done. The salvage people are, they're past masters at this. They're very good at it, and then they'll bring it to the surface. But it's up to the people to look and see what damage is there. I mean, if it's an implosion. What it is, it's the pressure of the sea pushing against the submarine's casing, outer shell, and then it will push into the main. Oops, sorry.
No, it's all right, Mike. You're a man in demand. Don't worry, but we've got you, so you're going to have to tell them to back off, I'm afraid. But what were you were saying? You were saying that the pressure would have got too much.
The pressure would have got too much, and it just squashes it. It's like putting a tin can of an empty can of Coke on the floor where you're sitting now, and then standing on it. That's exactly what it would be like.
Okay, and do you think that it is likely that this is something that actually did happen like days ago, or is it something that could have happened if this craft has run out of oxygen, if other things are switched off? I don't know, and that maybe it's happened more recently.
I think on reflection of it now, they were getting the pings coming from the mini sub, and then they stopped. So it might well be that it got to the seabed, it landed on the seabed, and then it imploded, and that would have destroyed the beacon for sending out the pings anyway. So it's a possibility that happened then. But if they can recover the wreckage, these are things that they'll identify.
How easy is it to find stuff out, Mike, from wreckage like this? Are people able to look at it after the event and be able to piece together exactly what's happened?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, it's like when an aeroplane crashes and they pick up all the little pieces and they take them to a large hangar and they sort of rebuild the aeroplane, and that's how they can work out what's gone wrong, why it crashed. And it's the same here. They'll get back as much as they can, I would suggest, so that they can find out what went wrong in the overall thing. And especially if there's any sort of legal litigation that's going to come from this down the line, they will want all the evidence they can get.
Mike, is it possible at all that any chance at all that this debris, other than the Titanic, could come from somewhere else, possibly washed into the area by the strong currents on the bottom of the ocean?
That's a yes. You just don't know. A ship could have been passing, dumped something over the side, and it drifts in the current and ends up landing there. I mean, the seabed, there is rubbish all over the seabed, from the shallow waters even into the deeper waters. So yes, that's what I'm saying, that they found something. They can probably identify that it's not Titanic material, but that's why they will want to film it and evaluate it, because they've got to confirm that is what it is and not just other debris.
So as you were saying there, then these currents that are down there, a lot of people might think that once you get to those depths, it's relatively still and quiet, but it's not, is it? Like you will say, there's so much rubbish on the bottom of the oceans. There's so many strong currents. That was one of the reasons as well, initially, why people were wondering, even if the Titan had been cut off from the world, I mean, it was near the Titanic when that happened, it could have drifted, it could have moved.
Yeah, the sea is a moving body. The entire, everything, we watch it when it's rolling on the beach, but the whole sea does move. To varying degrees, it gets less the deeper you go, generally. But, it's not a fixed thing. It's not like a bowl of water in your sink and it all stays nice and calm. There are a lot of factors that come into it.
And Mike, do you think that this is going to actually put a massive pause button on adventure trips like this? And dare I say it, maybe even research trips? And do you think that's necessary as well? Do you think that maybe this should be a bit of a wake-up call for people who, with absolute respect, have loads of money, can do whatever they want? In cases like Hamish, have been to space, apparently got 3 world records, and I can understand, massively, personally, I can understand the appeal to want to just do the most extreme things you possibly can with your life, and how, frankly, anything else might even seem a bit boring at times, if you are that kind of chap.
Yeah.
But actually, should this maybe be a bit of a wake-up call for people?
That's going to be a big legal debate. I think as an individual, if he wants to build a mini submarine, which is what he's done, and he takes people on board it, and they voluntarily go, and they know what the situation is, I suppose it becomes very difficult to say to them, sorry, you can't do that. Where I think it would impinge, it would do in the UK, when people pay money to go and do it, because it's being run like a business. And if you go on anything, a ride or in a fun fair, something like that, you expect that device you're on to be safe. And in this case, climbing into that mini sub, you would expect it to be safe and fit for purpose. And from what I'm reading, there was no certificate issued. There's nobody certified that it was fit for purpose. And I think even the guy that owns the device has actually commented on that. He cuts corners. I don't know. But what you're saying to somebody, no, you can't do it. So if you say that they can't go in a mini sub as normal civilians without the being a business, you're going to have to stop mountaineers climbing mountains, and you're going to have to stop people walking across the desert and all these other things that people do because they're challenges.
No, indeed. And it's worth noting as well, if you are just joining us, the US Coast Guard says that a debris field has been found somewhere near the wreck of the Titanic in that search area, and it's fair to say they will have thought long and hard about putting this message out. Everyone knows the connotations of this message, not least those people involved themselves. They will not have just rushed into tweeting something out like this, and I think people are right now to be very concerned that potentially the worst has happened. A debris field was discovered within their search area. As you were saying, though, Mike, the saving grace of all of this potentially would be that if anything has happened, it would have been incredibly quick.
Oh yeah, bang! It's happened. There's no. You cannot. The human body cannot survive at that depth. Even if you had a scuba tank on your back, they'd be completely ineffective. That's it. Bang! You're dead.
Indeed. Look,
it's
Mike.
as cold.
Go on.
It's as cold and hard as that.
Fair enough. Look, Mike, thank you very, very much for this and for staying with us for so long and giving your expertise on all of this. It is much appreciated. It's Marine Operations expert there, of course. I am just going to whiz through now to retired Royal Navy officer Admiral Sir James Burnell-Nugent, who I believe joins me now. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Although, of course, under what appears to be relatively bleak circumstances, the US Coast Guard has been tweeting that, of course, they will have a press conference this around 8 o'clock. Unfortunately, the news is that there's some debris that's been discovered. Your thoughts?
Well, they haven't said the nature of the debris, but it does sound like grim news. I must say, I suspect there are photographs being analysed in much the same way after a plane crash. You can identify whether the debris comes from the suspect aircraft. The same would be true in these circumstances if the vessel, if the Titan has imploded under the pressure down. I gather it was down at about 3,300 meters, just short of the depth of the Titanic, and the pressures down there are enormous. And if the vessel had imploded, first of all, it would be extremely quick. There's no question of life-saving under those circumstances, and probably debris, would have been scattered over a reasonable area. And it does begin to sound like that's what's been found. But we await more news from the Coast Guard.
It's worth noting how deep down this is. Apparently, the depth is that of 9 Empire State Buildings, which is vast. Of course it is. And as you've said there, the pressure will just be incredible. When you think about a commercial vehicle, which is essentially what this is, being sent to those depths, do you think that this was always a disaster waiting to happen?
I think it's a bit sort of wise after the event to say that. I think a lot of the technologies we take for granted today. The early days of flying machines, as they were called, with Wright and people who invented the airplane. The early motor cars, they weren't invented and certified, by the government of the day. These breakthroughs in technology, many of them are done by individuals, maybe engineers with great engineering skills, obviously financial backing, and people who've got an unquenchable appetite for adventure and risk. And when these things come together, these skills and these type of people and these resources, you do sometimes get accidents. That's the nature of exploration.
And we're talking about fully
into new areas of technology and capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about fully grown adults. In the case certainly of Hamish, billionaire, a bloke with a brain the size of our planet, says everybody who's ever met him, who went into this with his eyes wide open, who knew exactly what he was doing and was willing to pay a very, very handsome sum for the privilege as well. I spoke yesterday to a chap who'd been on Titan and been down to see the Titanic, thankfully made it back. He said that he'd had to sign waiver after waiver after waiver, which made it abundantly clear that, unfortunately, as he puts it, I'm quoting him now, there are 100 different ways to die when you're at those depths. So he knew about it completely, and he just said, look, I've done what I want to do in my life and I would like to have this experience, and he did it. So it's not like people, I think, were conned into this. They knew what was going on and they knew what the chances were. But, James, I think, a word to the families of those people now whose worst nightmare may well have come true, James, and, another potential, anyway, disaster at sea, something morbidly poetic about it at that site where the Titanic claimed so many lives all those years ago.
I think, yes, it goes without saying things must be extremely difficult for friends and family and all the people who are involved in the operation, and maybe even people who've been down to the Titanic on earlier trip. But I'm a bit wary of commenting on the situation of the families really until we've got more definite news. Debris at 3 miles, maybe 4 miles below the sea is a very difficult thing to identify. I think it would be wise to wait until we hear more from the Coast Guard before. Obviously, one feels immense sympathy for the family, but the case is not closed yet by any means.
No, and just talk to me a bit more about that. I mean, you, of course, are a retired Royal Navy officer, an admiral. You know the seas. You know the areas a bit like this, and this really could be anything. I mean, debris can come from all areas, can't it, really? And especially in those waters and at that depth. I mean, this is not a foregone conclusion at the moment, is it?
No, indeed not. There's a huge amount of debris on the sea, not least of which all the ships that were torpedoed in 2 world wars, and as we all know, planes have crashed and gone into the sea. There's a lot of debris on the seabed. But that said, the area that is involved are absolutely huge. And to find, look how long it took to find the Titanic. People were looking for it for years. And that's a huge bit of wreckage. So to have found something, possibly something new in the area where they were looking, does begin to add up.
OK, now, can I just ask you to stay on the line for me for a second, please, if that's OK? He's retired Royal Navy officer Admiral Sir James Burnell-Nugent there. Important to emphasise, I think, exactly what he said there. It's not a foregone conclusion. It sounds ominous. There's no two ways about that. It sounds absolutely terrible, doesn't it? The US Coast Guard has come out and said that they think they have found debris somewhere near the Titanic. It's in their search area. They have tweeted that, and there will be a press conference at 8 p.m, which we will take here at GB News. But it is not a foregone conclusion because there is so much debris around the ocean and so much else that could be. With me now is Gareth Russell, who's a historian and the author of The Ship of Dreams. Gareth, thank you very, very much. And before, again, I was alluding to there, this idea of the Titanic itself, and I just wonder whether or not this ties into the idea that potentially it should be a bit left alone, a bit untouchable. I don't know. What do you think?
That's a great point. I sort of seesaw on this a bit because I do understand why people say leave it alone, it's a gravesite, but so is the Tower of London, and hundreds of people go there every day. There's actually more people buried at the Tower than there is, that died on the Titanic. But I think if you add into that, as Sir James was saying, that the extraordinary amount of debris and danger that surrounds the Titanic as both a graveyard and a wreck site, I think pragmatism probably would tell us it should only be approached with caution. And if there are still major things which need to be uncovered, is there an archaeological justification for further dives? From a historian's perspective, all I can tell you is all the major questions about what happened to the Titanic on the night it sank and since have been answered by previous dives. So I think, yes, it probably should be approached for a variety of reasons with extreme caution.
Well, that is fascinating because with your historian's hat on, I would have maybe assumed that you would think that, just keep sending people down there. But you make a good point, which is that maybe we already know pretty much everything there is to know about the Titanic. Therefore, is it some kind of very dangerous vanity project? Is that maybe where you're at the minute a bit?
I think so. I'm not someone who is much of a thrill seeker in my travels. So, as they say, different strokes, different folks. Yeah. Everyone's interested and responds to different things. But when it is at a depth where 90% or a very high percentage of the world's submarines physically cannot reach it, it maybe is nature's way of telling you to approach on bended knee, as it were. I don't think that there is any substantial archaeological find that could justify the cost and the danger that goes into going to the Titanic anymore. In the same way, if we're looking at unwrapping a mummy, an ancient Egyptian mummy, once you've got all the information out of it, you don't keep tampering with it. And that's not to say that, microbiologists aren't interested in the life forms that, the rust, the famous rusticles that are growing off the Titanic. Of course, there are still scientific questions, but whether those are questions that are significant enough to justify the frequencies of these trips, I'm just not convinced at all. And I think also we have to bear in mind that as a tribute to the Titanic's creators, it's still in remarkable condition for a 111-year-old shipwreck, but it's still a 111-year-old shipwreck, and it is disintegrating. And if you even think about sort of those iconic shots of the bow, if you go back to where submarines used to be able to rest, they can't anymore because the roofs have collapsed. If you look and think about all the marble fixtures that are in the first-class bathrooms that could fall out if those walls give way, there are so many different ways for the ship to still pose a very serious danger.
It's so true. At the moment, the speculation, it is just that, but it is speculation that there may well have been some implosion. That's because of the pressure. Let's be honest, will be the obvious. That will be the obvious thing. But you've just rightly identified that actually there could well be other elements to this as well, and that potential implosion could have been caused by debris from the Titanic itself giving way and coming on it, not just the pressure. And it is such a risky site to take part of, which I suppose is also part of the attraction as well. Look, Gareth, thank you very, very much. It's been incredible to kind of get your historic knowledge on it all, really, and all the best. I'll chat to you again soon. It's Gareth Russell there, who's a historian and the author of The Ship of Dreams. I'm just going to go to Paul now, Paul Hawkins, who's our national reporter. And just, Paul, for people who are just tuning in, who are just watching, just listening, what is the very latest, the breaking news on the Titan sub?
So the very latest news that we have that broke round about just before 5, I think it was a tweet from the US Coast Guard that a debris field was discovered, and these are the exact words from the tweet. A debris field was discovered within the search area by an ROV, that's a remotely operated vehicle, near the Titanic. Experts within the Unified Command, that's the Coast Guard and the military, both the US and Canadian, Unified Command at Boston are evaluating the information, and there is a press conference that will be held at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. UK time. That is the only information we have from them at the moment. It's been found by an ROV. That's a remotely operated vehicle. There are two more that have been sent down today that have been combing the seabed. One of them, a French one, Victor 6000, very sophisticated bit of equipment, can produce high-resolution images, very sophisticated sound detection as well. It's got 2 robotic arms. I'm not sure exactly about the debris, the capability of it to retrieve bits of debris back to the surface. Clearly, we know that the visibility in the sea was pretty good today. It's very dark down there, but they do have, high-powered lights down there as well. It would have been able to get some images back to the crew who are at the mothership, tethered to Victor. Yeah. One would have thought they would like to try and retrieve some of those pieces just to identify firsthand how easy it is to take those pieces back to the surface. Remains to be seen. I know we were speaking to Mike earlier, and he was saying that they would drop a line down there, then use that line to grab the piece, and then the robot would then help manoeuvre it back up to the surface. Yeah. But you would have thought they would want to identify it first by sight, and then secondly by hand. Yeah. And you would have thought that before they send this tweet, they'd have some idea that they'd have something to say when we get to 8 o'clock this evening. 100%.
Look, Paul, thank you very much for all of that. It's Paul Hawkins, our national reporter. Very shortly, I'm going to throw you over to Michelle Jubes and co. But in light of this breaking news about the Titanic, this wreckage being found, debris being found near the wreckage of the Titanic, I just think it's worthwhile just sparing a thought for all of those people who were on board that vessel. God bless them.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.